Chapter 132, Death Siege. 2. A strong killing aura flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. Not waiting for the Tianqiong clan to advance any further, he lifted his own sword to attack. With a speed almost invisible to the naked eye, the light wind sword flashed out at the swords approaching Jian Chen. Against such a fast sword, even the stronger people in the group weren't able to properly defend themselves. The moment the sword finished its downward arc, the mercenaries had immediately fallen to the ground. A small trickle of blood flowed silently from their throats and stained the ground beneath them an iridescent, red color. But the Tianqiong clan had brought over 100 people, so the deaths of such a small amount of people was of no concern to them. Another group began to charge rampantly toward Jian Chen with sounds so loud that their stampeding echoed. Seeing the group of people that didn't seem to know death charge forward, Jian Chen's glare turned cooler. With a sigh, he increased the speed of his sword thrusts, and each one of the mercenaries found their throats stabbed. In their hearts, they knew this was a fatal blow and that there was not a single amount of mercy to be found within Jian Chen. Even though Jian Chen knew that the Tianqiong clan was a major clan in Wake City, he wasn't at all afraid of matters like this. Now that he was by himself once more, he didn't have anyone behind him he had to worry about, so there was nothing to be anxious about. Jian Chen's petite body constantly wove through his attackers as his light wind sword endlessly flashed around. With every arc of his sword, another person would fall, and thanks to his fierce battle strength, the entire restaurant had become a place of chaos. The chairs and tables that were previously organized neatly were now scattered about, while the fragrant dishes of food had crashed and spilled to the ground. As fast as a demon, Jian Chen quickly dispatched mercenary after mercenary. Within the span of a few seconds, another 10 mercenaries had fallen, never to rise again. It was almost as if Jian Chen had eyes on the back of his head that could observe everything on the battleground. Every single time a mercenary swung his saint weapon, Jian Chen would barely dodge the danger at the critical point. He was a single man facing dozens of people, but even after fighting for some time, he hadn't received any wounds. Even as the mercenaries tried their hardest to slash at him, Jian Chen's clothes didn't even have the slightest tear. Seeing his mercenaries fall to the floor one by one without Jian Chen sustaining any wounds, the young master of the Tianqiong clan scowled with dissatisfaction before cursing, "This group is useless, useless. Everyone here is good for nothing. I didn't know that my father had raised such a useless amount of trash that even a dozen of them couldn't seize a single person." He shook his head, turned to look at the man to his side before barking out, "What are you and your men standing around for? Hurry up and capture him. Once he is taken back to the Tianqiong clan, I will show him my awesomeness. Humph, anyone that's insulted me has never gotten away with it. He won't be an exception." The group of people the young master had yelled at was all the strongest mercenaries. With their statuses, they would definitely be highly respected, even in the Tianqiong clan. After not being given face by the young master as he yelled at them, they couldn't help but feel annoyed. The men looked at each other before one of them spoke out, "Although this person is young, he is extraordinarily strong. His movements and the speed of his sword are incomparably fast. Even if it were us going against him, we would have difficulty as well. Moreover, all of his sword strikes so far have been fatal. If the mercenaries did not die by a sword through their throats, then they died from having their hearts pierced. From this, you can see that this person is not simple at all. Facing him head-on right now would be an unwise decision, and we may even get injured. For now, it would be best to call a few people over for him to waste his saint force over. The moment he uses up all of his saint force, we will strike and win easily." "Not bad, I approve of this suggestion." The man's suggestion had been quickly endorsed by the other mercenaries. Although this would increase the amount of casualties among the Tianqiong clan, the responsibility of that would fall upon the young master himself and not the mercenaries themselves. And since this second-generation master didn't care for them at all, they weren't willing to throw away their lives for him. If it meant throwing away the lives of others to persevere their own lives, they would do it. Following up, another squad of mercenaries entered the restaurant to kill Jian Chen. The people in this group were of the great saint level, so they were stronger than the previous group by a large margin. Jian Chen immediately engaged the great saints in a fierce battle. Against a group who was much stronger than before, Jian Chen's pressure had greatly increased. He would not be able to fight as easily as before. As the fighting grew more and more intense, the entire restaurant became even more ruined. All of the surrounding walls had holes kicked through them, causing the entire restaurant to be on the verge of collapsing. Outside of the restaurant, a large crowd of people had gathered, and were passionately gossiping about the fight that was happening inside. Inside the restaurant. In a brilliant flash of silver, Jian Chen stabbed one of the great saints in the heart, killing him instantly. Stamping on the chest of the man, he sent the body flying backward, creating yet another hole in the walls of the restaurant before the body flew out. The restaurant shuddered violently once more, each sway stronger than the last. Finally, the loud crunching sounds of wood could be heard as it trembled once more. Jian Chen nimbly dodged the blades of 3 saint weapons while looking at the wobbling pillars of the restaurant. Without any hesitation, he pushed the mercenaries away as he escaped from the newly created hole, out onto the streets. Chase after him. Don't let him get away. The moment he saw Jian Chen leave the restaurant, the young master cried out at the mercenaries to chase after him. After the young master had spoken out, the group of mercenaries next to him had also cried out, "Not good, the restaurant's about to collapse, escort the young master away to safety." Immediately, a middle-aged man grabbed the young master by the shoulders before bringing him out of the way of the collapsing restaurant. Everyone else followed closely behind. The moment the group ran out of the restaurant, the entire restaurant caved in. In that moment, the mercenaries that didn't make it in time were buried. Soon after, a silver ray of light came flying toward the young master of the Tianqiong clan. Chapter 133, The Death of the Young Master of the Tianqiong Clan. Young Master, be careful. The middle-aged man cried out as he discovered the trajectory of the flashing white light. His face grew paler by 2 shades as he realized the sword was going too fast. With the sword already a meter from the young master's throat, under this type of situation, there was simply no time to react. PCH. Because of the lightning-like sword strike, the barely saint-level young master practically had no chance to react, and so the light-wind sword stabbed itself deeply into his throat. The young master of the Tianqiong clans widened his eyes as he looked dead-on at the sword in his throat. There was a look of disbelief. He was not expecting this outcome at all. To think that this depressed little mercenary he had come across on the road to the magical beast mountain range would unexpectedly be the one to end his life. If he had known about this before, he wouldn't have dared to come close to Jian Chen, but it was a shame that there was no such thing as a regret pill in this world for him to eat. Right now, his destiny was all but confirmed, and there was a better chance for him to alter the mountain range's landscape than this. Seeing their young master already have his throat pierced, the mercenaries by his side all stared in great shock, some had even paled instantaneously. They were fully aware that the person in front of them was the young master of the Tianqiong clan who was dearly loved by the clan leader. He was also the successor of the clan when the time came, so to see their young master be killed right in front of their eyes, they couldn't believe it. If the clan leader were to hear of this news, no one knew how furious he would become, and how severe their penalties would be. Just thinking about the severe temper of the Tianqiong clan leader had sent shivers among all of the mercenaries. Each one of them began to look at Jian Chen with rage. If they weren't able to bring Jian Chen back with them, then they would be served as a substitute instead. "Brat, you've killed our young master, prepare to die." All of the mercenaries began to charge at Jian Chen without hesitation while shouting out, "All Tianqiong mercenaries, surround him immediately. Don't let him escape." These mercenaries all held high statuses in the Tianqiong clan, so the moment they spoke, every other members of the Tianqiong clan threw away their hesitation and immediately surrounded Jian Chen from all 4 sides. At the same time, everyone that had been watching quickly distanced themselves further away. Even under the collapsed restaurant, a stream of mercenaries crawled out looking disheveled, but they continued to join the other mercenaries. Every single mercenary in the vicinity had seen with their own eyes the death of their young master by the hands of Jian Chen, so they fully understood the gravity of the situation. Everyone took a step back in order to divert attention from themselves. At this moment, no one was willing to go and inform the clan leader. They were afraid of being implicated in the death of the young master and suffering the wrath in place of Jian Chen. After landing the killing blow on the young master, Jian Chen had immediately started to fight with the middle-aged mercenaries. These mercenaries were of the Saint Master level, and 3 of them were even at the peak Saint Master level. Against so many Saint Masters, the pressure was on full blast, causing Jian Chen to have to go all out. Jian Chen and the mercenaries continued to exchange blows in an endless storm of blades and fists that left the mercenaries flustered. Taking advantage of the situation, Jian Chen had used his light wind sword and immediately stabbed one of the mercenaries through his heart. The moment Jian Chen had stabbed into the middle-aged man's heart, a big axe had landed onto his left shoulder, leaving behind a wound that trickled and dyed his clothes red with blood. Feeling an immense amount of pain in his left shoulder, Jian Chen's face immediately whitened. Pulling out his sword from the man's chest, he rapidly thrusted it at the mercenary with the axe. Seeing the silver flash of the light wind sword, the man with the axe immediately narrowed his eyes in concentration and brought his weapon up in front to receive the blow. At the moment of impact, the man was thrown backward by the explosive force. Ding! The tip of the light wind sword had stabbed into the blade of the axe. But thanks to the amount of sword qi around the sword, it had left a noticeable dent in the glossy blade. A sharp metallic sound was heard as 5 saint weapons immediately headed toward Jian Chen at the same time while cutting off any possible escape routes for Jian Chen. The amount of saint force that was radiating from each weapon was enough to cause a massive amount of air fluctuations. Jian Chen's eyes flashed in annoyance as the amount of sword qi on his light wind sword was increased several times over, making the sword seem even hazier than before. In a flash he struck out at the 5 saint weapons and struck each one with a clang. While the light wind sword had stopped the 5 saint weapons, Jian Chen's face grew white slightly as his right arm began to shake marginally. This combined strike was the unified strength of all 5 mercenaries, which would be extremely difficult to accept with ease. Because of the large amount of force put behind the 5 mercenaries, Jian Chen's entire right arm had gone numb as even his inner organs had been temporarily shaken. Ha! Angrily shouting out, the Saint Masters didn't dare let Jian Chen have the opportunity to breathe in rest. Once more striking at him, these mercenaries were extraordinarily clever. Unless there was a hole in their attack pattern, Jian Chen would find it hard to defend himself without getting seriously harmed. A fierce expression revealed itself on Jian Chen's face as he unexpectedly stood in front of the 5 saint weapons. His light wind sword then transformed in a silver streak of light as it flew at the closest person at breakneck speed. PCH. The light wind sword met no obstructions as it penetrated the man's throat. At the same time, the 5 saint weapons that were on the verge of cutting into him had their saint force already about to touch his clothes. In a split second, Jian Chen's body twisted in a way that had dodged 3 of the saint weapons, but the remaining 2 had struck him on the back and waist. Jian Chen stifled a shout as his already white face grew even more pale. He immediately pulled his sword from the throat of one of the mercenaries and looked at the remaining fighters. He threw away the idea of continuing to fight zealously and began to plan his way of escape from this area. Jian Chen clearly understood that the Tianqiong clan had a formidable amount of power. The longer he stayed here, the more unfavorable his position would be. With his current strength, he would only be able to fight against a Saint Master. If the Tianqiong clan had a great Saint Master, he would be in trouble. However, with his remaining amount of strength, it would not be enough to defend himself. Sensing Jian Chen's plan to escape, one of the remaining Saint Masters immediately cried out, "Block him quickly. Don't let him escape." Chapter 134, Wrath of the Tianxiong clan. Sensing that Jian Chen was planning to escape, one of the remaining Saint Masters immediately cried out, "Block him quickly. Don't let him escape." The vigilant mercenaries surrounding the Saint Masters and Jian Chen immediately charged forward to block Jian Chen heroically. The Saint weapons in their hands immediately came down toward Jian Chen, and despite knowing how exceptionally strong Jian Chen was, those who came forward to block him were not afraid at all. Jian Chen's legs blurred slightly, causing him to deviate from his original path and onto the side. Dodging the numerous Saint weapons, his right arm shook as his light wind sword danced wildly all around. One by one, the mercenaries that had tried to block him fell to the ground. How would saints or great saints be able to defend against Jian Chen's usage of the profound steps? Despite being injured and having his fighting ability lowered, if Jian Chen were to use his entire strength, these mercenaries still wouldn't have a chance. After killing the mercenaries with lightning speed, Jian Chen twisted his body without any hesitation, and began to run away from the mercenaries, as if possessed by a demon. As for the people that were observing the fight, they immediately left the road as soon as they saw him charge straight at them. It was almost as if they were afraid of obstructing Jian Chen and meeting the same fate the Tianxiong clan members had. Jian Chen had fought against the Tianxiong clan by himself while killing a few high-ranking experts, and even 2 peak Saint Masters, completely unafraid of the Tianxiong clan. The fact that he had even killed the young master of the clan had scared the mercenaries so much that they didn't dare to provoke him. In fact, some people had started to see him as a person with the strength of a great Saint Master. This type of person was rare to see even in a large group of mercenaries. Jian Chen was moving at an extraordinary speed. In a short moment, he was already 30 meters away from the group of mercenaries watching him. At that moment, because there wasn't enough time, the mercenaries that were watching him simply weren't fast enough to open a path for him. Just as Jian Chen was about to reach the group of mercenaries, his 2 feet suddenly stomped on the ground, pushing his entire body into the air, his feet still in a running position. The amount of force behind his leap was tremendous, sending him flying 10 meters away from the mercenaries. The moment his body touched the ground, Jian Chen began to run away from them once more. After him. Hurry up and chase him. Don't let him escape. Catch him quickly. He's trying to escape from the city. Someone send a message to the city military officers to close the gates. A collection of furious, impatient shouts were heard as the mercenaries charged in from behind with deafening sounds. The few Saint Masters had followed Jian Chen's actions and leapt over the observers, before quickly disappearing into the streets. The great Saint and Saint-level mercenaries quickly followed behind. Roar! Not too long after they entered the streets, the angry snarl of a magical beast could be heard from behind. The roar caused the entire street to shake, almost as if there was an earthquake. The mercenaries that were still standing around to watch suddenly cleared the road as an ox-like magical beast came charging through. Mounted on top of the magical beast was a sturdy, middle-aged man wearing a gold-embroidered robe. From his appearance, he looked to be approaching his 50s, and his serious expression made him seem even more imposing. His pupils as dark as the night itself shone with a cold glare that made many of the weaker mercenaries unable to look at him in the face. In a remote city like Wake City, people that had the ability to ride magical beasts were a very rare sight. One thing was for sure, however, if the person who was riding a magical beast was not a high-leveled expert, then it was a person from a noble clan. That was because only these 2 types of people could typically use magical beasts as mounts. Following behind the middle-aged magical beast rider was a group of about 50 people. Each member stood in a clean formation with a serious expression, and they looked like soldiers who were well trained. The exact moment the middle-aged man came into view, everyone's eyes focused in on him. The entire area descended into a strange silence. But soon after, the observing mercenaries all began to comment to each other. "Isn't that the Tianxiong clan's leader, Tianxiong Lai? I didn't think he'd arrive so soon. It is said that not only is the Tianqiong clan the strongest clan in Wake City, but the clan leader is also extremely strong. He has already reached the middle Great Saint Master realm, and also possesses a defense based on his Earth attribute Saint Force as well. In all of Wake City, there are very few people that can contend against the Tianqiong clan's Tianqiong Lai. The young master of the Tianqiong clan is the result of years of hard work by Tianqiong Lai. It was with great difficulty that he had raised a son. It could even be said just giving birth to him was difficult enough. Ever since the young master's birth, Tianqiong Lai had treated him like an expensive treasure. I don't know how angry Tianqiong Lai will become after finding out his son has been killed. His son had been the only candidate for passing on Tianqiong clan's legacy. Tianqiong Lai, who was sitting on the magical beast, stared down at the mercenaries below him with a frosty glare. However, the moment his eyes fell on the white-robed youth on the floor, his eyes suddenly went rigid as an intense killing intent flooded out of him. His face began to grow red, even his breathing became laborious, and his facial expression changed to one of disbelief. Kong Air! Tianqiong Lai cried out with a slight tremble in his voice. Jumping down from his mount, he ran over to where his son lay with wide eyes. Tianqiong Lai's face paled rapidly as he studied the all-too-familiar face on the ground with a look of utter shock. Kong Air! Tianqiong Lai cried out in anguish as he shook the youth's shoulder with both his hands. Feeling the icy body, Tianqiong Lai's heart felt like it had shattered. From his vast amount of experience, he already knew that this person had already stopped breathing and died. Kong Air! Kong Air! Tianqiong Lai continued to cry out in sorrow as tears began to flow from his eyes. His clear tears fell from his eyes, slowly flowing down his son's steadfast face, and eventually falling to the ground and breaking. Tianqiong Kong was the sole heir to Tianqiong Lai. Because of an injury to his body, he had long since been rendered unable to have children. But this child had been his proudest achievement, and he had always doted on this son of his. Since it was impossible for him to have children, Tianqiong Kong was the clan's darling treasure. But now that Tianqiong Lai's pride and joy were suddenly killed, his heart had been attacked and crushed in a way that was impossible to describe with words. Tianqiong Lai looked to be around 40 to 50 years old, but that was because of the normal life expectancy of those on the Tianyuan continent, as well as his cultivation. In reality, he was already within his 70s, and with the injuries he had sustained earlier in life, he was utterly incapable of reproducing. Who was it that killed my Kong Air? No matter who it is, I Tianqiong Lai, will rip their body apart into 1,000 pieces. Chapter 135, Escape from Wake City. Wake City may have been a third-class city with a small amount of permanent residents, but because of its proximity to the magical Beast Mountain range and the amount of fertile land around them, the amount of people that flowed in and out of the city was at a constant high. There were countless merchants and peddlers trying to sell their wares in the streets of Wake City. Some stores were selling almost anything imaginable, but among all the stores, restaurants held the dominant spot in the industry. Mercenaries and merchants in caravans endlessly walked the streets while gossiping among each other. The clamor in the streets was truly a sign that Wake City was flourishing. However, at this moment, there was a huge disturbance on those same streets. Everyone could only see a youthful figure with blood-soaked clothes come running toward them at breakneck speeds. The appearance of the youth had been noticed by many people on the streets, who all pointed and began to chat with each other. Whoever blocks that person will be heavily rewarded by the Tianqiong clan. At the same time, a thunderous yell came from behind. A few more disheveled figures came running out from behind as they chased after the youth at equally fast speeds. Tianqiong clan, they're from the Tianqiong clan. The Tianqiong clan is the #1 clan in Wake City. I wouldn't dare to provoke the person that has committed an offense against the Tianqiong clan. After hearing the middle-aged man's words, many mercenaries began to whisper to each other. However, not a single person decided to chase after that youth and block his path. That youth was Jian Chen, the one who had easily killed the young master of the Tianqiong clan, as well as a few other mercenaries affiliated with them. Jian Chen hurried on over toward the city gates. Whenever he came across an obstruction, he would quickly fly over it with extreme speed. Despite this, there were still a few Saint Masters that were chasing him closely. However, Jian Chen's use of the profound steps had put him at an advantage, so even though those middle-aged men were stronger than him, they were unable to overtake him. They would at least need to be at the great saint level with a wind-attributed saint force in order to overwhelm him, otherwise, their speed was only enough to barely keep up with Jian Chen's level. Plus, they weren't able to overcome the obstacles as easily as Jian Chen had. Despite being a third-class city, the amount of area Wake City spanned across was still huge. Even if Jian Chen hurried to the city gates as fast as he possibly could, the period would at least take the amount of time it takes for a candle to burn. Having put all his effort into running away, Jian Chen was now breathing quite hard. He had previously just engaged in a fierce battle that consumed quite a bit of his saint force, and now he was even injured. The burden that he felt from running with all his might under his current condition was extremely great. In addition, his body was feeling the intense pain from his wounds every time he moved, so Jian Chen's nerves were being put to the severe test. Up ahead, the gigantic and majestic towers of the city gates blurrily came into view, along with the soldiers on it. Right now, Jian Chen was about 5 kilometers away from the city gates, while the Saint Masters behind him were about 50 meters away from him. Seeing the city gates get closer and closer, Jian Chen's heart couldn't help but relax a bit, although his speed didn't lessen. Jian Chen was aware that with his current strength, there was no way for him to go against the Tianqiong clan, which had an enormous influence over Wake City. Right now, all Jian Chen wanted to do was to escape from Wake City. That way, the amount of danger would decrease drastically. Roar! At this moment, the angry roar of a magical beast came from behind Jian Chen. As the roar dissipated, another angry shout followed soon after. I, Tianqiong Lai, will heavily reward whoever catches that man. Hearing the sounds coming from behind, Jian Chen's face changed slightly. Based on the voice, he could determine how strong the person was, and this was someone he couldn't afford to fight against. Tianqiong Lai, I presume that's someone else from the Tianqiong clan. Jian Chen thought to himself secretly. Increasing his speed, Jian Chen began to run even faster. The merchants and mercenaries that had heard the angry roar of Tianqiong Lai looked stunned. Tianqiong Lai, isn't that the current leader of the number 1 clan in Wake City? To offend a member of the Tianqiong clan and then be chased by them, means that they must be a strong person then. Forget it, I've only just reached the great saint level, it's best not to get involved. The Tianqiong clan is the strongest within the city, if I were to help stop this person, then Tianqiong Lai would definitely reward me handsomely. Perhaps I can even become a friend of the Tianqiong clan. Something like this would be very fortuitous for me. A few of the mercenaries who were familiar with the power structure in Wake City began to talk about the status of Tianqiong Lai. As they talked to each other, a few of the stronger men had started to weigh the benefits of helping out. It was obvious that Tianqiong Lai had quite an amount of prestige in Wake City. The moment he spoke out, many mercenaries had immediately been influenced. Seeing Jian Chen come running toward them, many of the mercenaries had already brought out their saint weapons and walked out to block Jian Chen's path. The moment one mercenary walked forward, all the other mercenaries followed suit, and helped to block Jian Chen's path. These men were clearly enticed by the irresistible reward put up by Tianqiong Lai. After all, the Tianqiong clan was as powerful in reality as they were in name. Seeing the group of people up ahead, Jian Chen's face immediately hardened. But since he was going so fast, he was already right next to them in the span less than 5 seconds. Just as Jian Chen was about to make contact, the mercenaries brought their saint weapons out too as they charged at him. Not wanting to get entangled with them, Jian Chen leapt into the air to dodge the incoming group. Landing on top of the roof of a store, he disappeared over the heads over the crowd. Where do you think you're escaping to? Immediately a group of experts with faster reaction times flew up with him, and slashed at Jian Chen with their saint weapons. A severe amount of killing intent flashed from Jian Chen as the silver-colored light wind sword appeared out of nowhere. With a swish of his hand, it quickly flew at his pursuers. Ding 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 ding. The sounds of saint weapons clashing against each other rang throughout the air as blood began to sprinkle down below. The few amount of mercenaries that had chased after Jian Chen were like broken kites that had backed down to the ground uselessly. After dropping them to the ground and silently struggling by hearse. There was no movement from them. Instead, a trickle of blood flowed from their throats and chests to the ground below them. Chapter 136, Pursuit of the Tianxiong clan. While Jian Chen was in midair, he had quickly killed the mercenaries who were chasing him. This sudden show of strength had surprised everyone. They hadn't thought that Jian Chen would be able to kill the mercenaries. With this new development, many of the mercenaries decided against their original plan to block Jian Chen. Although many people were seduced by Tianxiong Lai's promise of a heavy reward, one needed to be alive to claim it. If they were to throw away their lives, they would not be able to enjoy it even if they earned the reward. After killing the mercenaries blocking his path, Jian Chen continued onward. Jumping down from the buildings, he ran off to get closer to the city gates. After seeing what had just happened, there was no longer any mercenary that dared to obstruct him. So for a good amount of time, Jian Chen's journey to the city gates was very smooth. You won't get away. Even if you run to the ends of the earth itself, I, Tianxiong Lai, swear to break your body into 1,000 pieces. An angry roar came from the Tianxiong clan leader riding on his magical beast mount from behind Jian Chen. They were currently chasing after Jian Chen at top speeds, and it wasn't hard to tell from the noise just how powerful Tianxiong Lai's determination to kill Jian Chen was. Jian Chen's killing of Tianxiong Kong was tantamount to killing Tianxiong Lai's whole family. After all, Tianxiong Kong was his sole son, and with Tianxiong Lai's body being in such a state, he had lost the ability to reproduce. Jian Chen turned a deaf ear from Tianxiong Lai's murderous roars. The only thing he wanted to do was to quickly escape from the huge city. The sounds of the footsteps from behind were getting louder and louder as Jian Chen realized that they belonged to a magical beast much faster than his own speed. 5 kilometers, 4 kilometers, 3 kilometers. Jian Chen was rapidly approaching the city gates. There was only 2 kilometers left until he reached them. He could already see the giant gates leading outside of the city, but right behind was Tianxiong Lai, who was riding his magical beast only 1 kilometer behind him. Commander Haddo, if you can close this gate and help stop this person, then I, Tianxiong Lai, won't be able to thank you enough. Tianxiong Lai's voice came out like powerful thunder from behind him. Quickly, the city gates to Wake City began to close. Seeing the city gates close, Jian Chen's face immediately fell. His eyes swept toward the gates 40 meters away as he let out a deep breath of air. The saint force within his body began to circulate within his body, increasing his speed by some degree. At the same time, Jian Chen was employing the techniques he had learned from his past life. Both of his legs ran at such a fast speed that his feet looked as if they were gliding across the ground. For every 10 or 20 meters that he glided, his legs touched the ground once. In a flash, Jian Chen arrived at the foot of the city gates. Already, there was a large group of mercenaries congregating by the rapidly closing gates awaiting Jian Chen. Quite a few of them were cursing Jian Chen. Jian Chen didn't bother to slow down at the sight of this. Instead, his legs disappeared in a blur as he ran another 30 meters before leaping at the city gates in preparation to climb it. Finally gathering his strength, Jian Chen's legs stamped onto the ground and began to scale the wall. The moment Jian Chen had started to climb the wall, the people below had immediately taken notice and began to chatter non-stop. In 2 breaths' time, Jian Chen had smoothly climbed up the 40-meter-tall city wall. Both of his legs stepped off of the wall without a hitch, and he flew over the heads of one of the guards on top of the wall before descending down the other side. It was going well for Jian Chen. On his way down the city wall, he met no obstructions. Even as he flew over the heads of the guards on top of the wall, they could only look at him with wide eyes. As Jian Chen climbed the city walls, Tianxiong Lai, who was right behind, immediately jumped up onto the wall without his magical beast and started to scale it in the same manner as Jian Chen had. However, not only was the magical beast very heavy, it was not an expert in climbing, so it remained on the ground as Tianxiong Lai stopped in his tracks, but didn't admit his violations, nor was he willing to go with the officials. After that, another group of 10 middle-aged men rushing over and looked at the city walls before climbing up the wall and running in the same direction as Jian Chen. These people were the Saint Masters of the Tianxiong clan. Open the gates. Just as these people flew out from the city, a deep sound came out from behind the gates. Soon after, the closed gates began to slowly creak open. On the wall stood 2 middle-aged men. One of them wore a long white robe, while the other wore black armor. At that moment, the 2 middle-aged men were looking at the group of people currently walking into the distance outside of the city at rapid speeds. When Jian Chen's group disappeared from their lines of sight, the middle-aged man wearing armor looked at the white-robed man next to him and asked, "Commander Haddo, why didn't you hold him back?" The white-robed middle-aged man smiled and said, "He killed Tianxiong Lai's sole son, Tianxiong Kong, and I haven't even had the chance to thank him yet. Why would I stop him?" The armored man paused for a bit, and seemed to have thought of something. He broke into a smile that made it seem like he was taking joy in another's misfortune. Outside the city, the feverish Jian Chen looked back at Tianxiong Lai, who was pursuing him from behind. His face grew heavy as he saw Tianxiong Lai. Although Jian Chen hadn't fought with him yet, he knew that Tianxiong Lai was not an equal opponent. Looking at the area behind him, Jian Chen began to think for a while before biting his lips in frustration and then turned to run toward the direction of the magical beast mountain range. He knew that in this wide open space, there would be no way for him to shake off the determined Tianxiong Lai. The only method for him was to run toward the magical beast mountain range. From there, he would be able to use the complicated forest and terrain to his advantage to escape from him. Seeing the gap between him and Jian Chen shrink further and further, Tianxiong Lai's eyes immediately turned red. He didn't conceal his powerful murderous aura at all as he roared in anger, "You can't run away from me." Jian Chen turned back to survey his surroundings. There was only about a 500 m difference between him and Tianxiong Lai. Based on this situation, Tianxiong Lai would most likely catch up with him before he reached Magical Beast Mountain Range. Jian Chen hesitated for a bit before clenching his teeth. The light wind sword suddenly materialized in his right hand. The next moment, Jian Chen's figure, which was rushing forward, suddenly stopped. He then spontaneously charged toward Tianxiong Lai. "Great Saint Master, I want to witness exactly how strong you are." Chapter 137, Battling a Great Saint Master. Seeing that Jian Chen was no longer running, and was even voluntarily rushing toward him, Tianxiong Lai couldn't help but give a fierce-looking smile as he roared, "Yes, come. I'm going to dismember your body into thousands of pieces. No, dying would be letting you off too lightly. I will definitely make you live in a hell to the point where you'd rather die." As he said this, a wide axe suddenly appeared in Tianxiong Lai's hand. This axe was extremely large, over double the size of Tianxiong Lai's tall and sturdy body. The entire axe had the color and luster of yellow earth, and its sharp edge flashed with a cold, threatening glow. The light wind sword in Jian Chen's hand slashed through air, making a faint, air-splitting sound as it was thrust toward Tianxiong Lai. "Ha!" Tianxiong Lai let out an explosive shout, and the axe in his hand suddenly flashed with a yellow glow. It then swung down toward Jian Chen with a shrill ear-piercing shriek. "To think that it's an earth-attributed saint force." Seeing the yellow glow on the axe, Jian Chen's heavy expression couldn't help but sink even further. He then immediately retracted his light wind sword to dodge Tianxiong Lai's attack. With a flash, he appeared next to Tianxiong Lai's side, and the light wind sword pierced toward his waist. Tianxiong Lai sneered. He suddenly let go of one of the hands gripping the axe, and his palm quickly became surrounded by a layer of yellow light. Just like that, it began to rush to grab Jian Chen's light wind sword. The light wind sword was tightly caught by Tianxiong Lai's right hand, and the sharp sword blade unexpectedly didn't harm him at all. There was a trace of shock reflected in Jian Chen's eyes. Although he had long since heard about the profound talent that those with the earth attribute possessed, their extremely powerful defense, but he hadn't realized it'd be to such an extent. Afterward, Jian Chen's eyes fiercely flashed. In the next moment, the light wind sword currently being tightly grasped by Tianxiong Lai's right hand suddenly emitted powerful sword qi. Under this strong attack, the yellow layer of light around Tianxiong Lai's right hand quickly turned lighter, indicating that it was faintly dissipating. Tianxiong Lai quickly released the light wind sword. The moment his hand left the blade, the yellow glow surrounding his hand also disappeared. A yellow cross-shaped wound could be seen on Tianxiong Lai's hand, and fresh blood quickly covered his entire palm, dyeing it crimson. His eyes never once wavered from Jian Chen, who stood right in front of him. Tianxiong Lai gave an angry growl as he continued to focus on Jian Chen before demanding, "Speak, why did you kill my Kong heir? Who was it that hired you to do it?" Seeing how there was a good 10 feet distance from Tianxiong Lai, Jian Chen lowered his sword a fraction and spoke coldly, "No one told me to do anything, it was your son that provoked me first. If you want to blame anyone, then blame yourself for teaching a child to not know anything besides bragging and causing trouble wherever he goes." Tianxiong Lai's glare froze over at Jian Chen before asking once more, "Was there really no person that told you to kill my son? You need not be afraid of being someone's scapegoat. If you tell me right now, then I'll let you die a quick death. I've already told you. It's up to yourself if you want to believe it or not." Jian Chen replied. Seeing how there was no hint of a lie in Jian Chen's words, Tianxiong Lai couldn't help but believe him. Opening his mouth, he said, "So it seems that it was my fault, I was too lenient on Kong heir, and so Kong heir is dead because of me." As he spoke, Jian Chen could hear the sorrow and regret in Tianxiong Lai's voice. At this moment, a decent distance away, a group of 10 people were approaching rapidly. Seeing the group of people behind Tianxiong Lai, Jian Chen's mood couldn't help but change for the worse. If he couldn't defend himself against someone like Tianxiong Lai, then with another 10 Saint Masters added into the mix, Jian Chen would definitely die here today. While reabsorbing his light wind sword back into his body, Jian Chen's feet immediately stamped against the ground, causing a clump of dirt to fly up. Concentrating the saint force in his body in his hands, he slapped the dirt forward. Immediately, the clump of dirt became a huge dust cloud that flew toward Tianxiong Lai and blocked his vision. Gaining this new opportunity, Jian Chen didn't hesitate. His figure immediately became a blur as he headed toward the magical beast mountain range. Because of the dust cloud, Tianxiong Lai's vision was heavily impacted and could not see around himself at all. In order to avoid a surprise attack by Jian Chen, he immediately leapt backward from the dust cloud area. Although, the moment he saw Jian Chen had instead chosen to run away, he exploded with anger, "You can't escape." Before he had even finished talking, he started to chase after Jian Chen. However, because of this delay, the head start Jian Chen had gave him a few hundred meters of distance. In this current situation, Jian Chen was unable to heal himself using the light saint force. What he needed the most was to run away at full speed to the magical beast mountain range to avoid Tianxiong Lai's wrath. Wake City was only 20 kilometers away from the magical beast mountain range. With Jian Chen running as if his life depended on it, he was already close to the magical beast mountain range. Arriving at the forest, which was by the outskirts of the mountain, he came across a dense part of the forest. Tianxiong, who was still chasing him from behind, could already guess what Jian Chen was planning to do. With some hesitation, he brought out his giant axe that gleamed in the light in his hands. Tianxiong held his axe above his head before letting out an explosive shout and swinging downward. Then a 2-meter-long Earth attribute Saint Force-colored crescent moon came flying toward Jian Chen. Sensing a large amount of energy fluctuating behind him, Jian Chen didn't bother to look around and instead ran to the side in an attempt to dodge. The crescent moon-like force of energy had moved past Jian Chen's back. This time, Jian Chen's good luck had saved him once more. Bang! The Earth Saint Force exploded against a huge rock, letting out a loud sound as a result and scattering the energy in all 4 directions. The stone, which was previously the height of 2 people and 3 meters wide, exploded into multiple fragments that flew everywhere. Several of the fragments that flew from the stone hit Jian Chen. Jian Chen had tried his best to avoid every single stone fragment that flew at him, but with the sheer amount of them, enough to cover the sky, there were already some sharp rocks that had made it past his defenses. With this unfortunate accident, Jian Chen's movement was definitely hindered. "Kid, accept your death." A loud roar came from behind. It was Tianxiong with his axe up high and a large amount of Saint Force ready to be used. Chapter 138, A Chance to Kill from the Forest. Indiana. A flash, the light wind sword appeared in Jian Chen's hand. In the next moment, an overwhelming amount of sword qi began to flow around the sword, causing it to look hazy to everyone. Separating itself from Jian Chen's hand, it became a streak of silver light as it flew toward Tianxiong axe at unbelievable speeds. Ding! The light wind sword and the axe collided against each other, creating a sound of metal hitting metal. After the attack, the strong amount of sword qi on the light wind sword and the Earth Saint Force on the axe began to dim with each push against each other. A large shockwave had then resulted, spreading out with the 2 weapons acting as the epicenter, pushing Jian Chen backward just by the force. The light wind sword was blasted backward before slowly floating to a halt. Stopping 10 meters away from where it used to be, it began to shake violently before another wave of sword qi enveloped the sword and shot forward once more. Whoosh! At this moment, the light wind sword was like it possessed a mind of its own. With a shrill sound as it traveled through the air, it flew toward Tianxiong without any further delay. Seeing the light wind sword come at his throat, Tianxiong immediately tilted his neck out of the way. Despite the light wind sword barely missing his neck, the sword qi on the sword had left behind a small trace of a wound on his neck. Jian Chen cried out in pity inwardly, to think that he had such a good opportunity and Tianxiong had unexpectedly dodged it. He wasn't discouraged. Using his spirit to control the light wind sword, he commanded it to fly at Tianxiong once more. Seeing how the light wind sword was flying by itself in midair, Tianxiong couldn't but cry out in shock at this inconceivable event. What kind of trick is this, a saint weapon that is being controlled by no one? How can it fly by itself with such a speed? Tianxiong questioned to himself in amazement. No matter how much he looked at it, he wasn't able to understand it. This was something out his range of knowledge. Once more, under the control of Jian Chen, the light wind sword flashed toward Tianxiong. Tianxiong shouted loudly as his Earth Saint Force began to emanate from his body before condensing over his body like a type of armor. Raising his saint weapon into the air, he sent it flying down toward the light wind sword. At Jian Chen's will, the light wind sword avoided Tianxiong attack by moving to the side. Because Jian Chen's strength was far too different from Tianxiong, even if the soul sword increased his attack power several times over, it was still not enough to take on a hit from Tianxiong. Meanwhile, Tianxiong Earth Saint weapon crashed into the ground. Bang! Came the sound as the axe ejected all of the nearby dirt, creating a crater. The light wind sword flew around in a circle before reorienting itself and flying at Tianxiong once more. Before Tianxiong could even react, the the sharp point of the sword had stabbed into his sturdy body. The incredibly sharp sword qi collided against the incredibly sturdy body of Tianqiong Lai. As the two forces grinded against each other, Tianqiong Lai's durable body couldn't handle the pressure anymore. The light wind sword bore a hole in his armor and stabbed through into his body. However, just as the light wind sword was about to stab into his skin, the inner saint force within Tianqiong Lai's body blocked it. The great Saint Master's saint force then began to force it out of his body. Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together as he thought about how difficult Tianqiong Lai was. He didn't think that with such a good opportunity, he still wasn't able to kill him. It would appear that even with the assistance of the soul sword, he was only able to hinder Tianqiong Lai for a moment. Even with good luck, he wouldn't be able to do serious harm, and if he wanted to kill him, it would be easier to scale the heavens. With the soul sword taking up a lot of his spirit, Jian Chen wouldn't be able to last for much longer. Thinking to himself, Jian Chen quickly came to a decision. In a split second, the light wind sword flew back to his hand before disappearing from view. Without further hesitation, Jian Chen began to run toward the magical beast mountain range. The most important matter was that he needed to run away. Because of Tianqiong Lai's strength, defending himself was a difficult task. Right now it was impossible to kill him, it would be for the best to wait until he was stronger and then come back to resolve the issue. Tianqiong Lai stared gloomily at Jian Chen escaping as the earth saint force surrounding him was slowly absorbed back into his body. On his back was a small wound that was slowly dyeing a part of his clothes red. Clan leader. My lord. At that moment, 10 mercenaries came into view behind Tianqiong Lai and stared with shock at the wound on Tianqiong Lai's back. Chase him, you cannot let him escape. Tianqiong Lai shouted before leading the mercenaries forward. Jian Chen had already entered the thick part of the forest in a mad dash. However, his current speed was a lot slower than his original speed. Just breathing was a laborious task now and his face was rapidly paling. With each and every step he took he could feel the various wounds inflicted on him, tormenting his nerves. There was no time for him to find a place to treat his wounds, so he could only focus on running instead of using the light saint force to heal himself. Stopping under a big tree to catch his breath, he turned his head around only to see Tianqiong Lai chasing from behind. Regaining his bearings, Jian Chen once more began to run toward the magical beast mountain range. On the road, Jian Chen had used the trees and tall grass to hide his figure in order to throw off his trackers. In the forest it was a lot easier to hide. The trees and tall grass would throw off any pursuers with ease. Unknown to the both of them, the chase had taken over half the day, meaning it was noon once more. The scorching hot sun was blocked by the cloudy skies, making the area around him look murky and dark. While Tianqiong Lai and his group of mercenaries were trying to track Jian Chen's footprints through the magical beast mountain range, in the end, they had finally lost him. Tianqiong Lai stared angrily at the tall grass around him with a dreadful expression. Immediately taking out a piece of paper from his robes, he said, "Xing Dao, take this warrant back immediately and organize for a group to search the mountain range." "Yes, my lord." One of the males took the warrant from Tianqiong Lai's hand and disappeared from the forest. Chapter 139, Stealth Kill. After the mercenary with the warrant left, Tianqiong Lai waved his hand at the others, searched the surrounding area carefully for any traces. "I want to know where he ran off to." After losing track of Jian Chen, Tianqiong Lai and his group of mercenaries could only hope to look for traces left behind by him, but this was a task that was significantly hard. In a dense part of the forest in the magical beast mountain range, Jian Chen sat down under a big tree with a pale face. Carefully using his light wind sword to pick out the pieces of stone fragments in his body, his clothes were beginning to be dyed completely red. Each time the tip of the light wind sword stabbed into his flesh, a new wave of pain pelted through Jian Chen. The constant source of pain had tested Jian Chen's nerves, and his forehead was soaked with sweat with each additional moment. When the final stone fragment had been extracted from his body, Jian Chen finally let loose a relieved grunt. Without energy, he slumped against the wide tree trunk and calmly took in deep breaths of air. After resting for a while, Jian Chen concentrated his senses on his surroundings only to discover that it was peaceful once more. Sitting in a cross-legged position, a ball of white light slowly came into view and enveloped Jian Chen in it. It continued to heal Jian Chen's body for a few moments before turning into a ball of milky white light. By this point, Jian Chen's body was completely submerged. From the outside, you could only see a blurry outline of his body. For an hour, Jian Chen continued to stay submerged in that milky glow of white light before it started to gradually dissipate. Not too long afterward, his body could be clearly seen within it. This time, Jian Chen's face no longer had that pale look on it, instead his regular healthy glow was back. The various wounds that used to adorn his body were now completely gone without a single scar left on his body. However, Jian Chen didn't wake out of his stupor just yet. He continued to recollect the lost saint force he has used up in his escape. The amount he had used was not small, and the saint force within his body had almost been completely depleted. Because of the fact that he was not only in the magical beast mountain range where magical beasts could find him, but Tianqiong's men would be searching the area. So all Jian Chen could do was to try and maintain his body's optimal condition in order to be able to confront any dangers he might come across. Not aware of how much time had elapsed, Jian Chen's body had actually sat in the same position for 6 hours, constantly refilling his saint force. Not at any single point in time did his body move, neither did his eyes ever blink open. It was almost like he was a monk that had entered a deep meditation state and had completely lost awareness of the material world around him. At that moment, from behind a tree, a slender python came slithering out noiselessly toward Jian Chen. Coiling around the tree, it paused, before it slowly glided toward him again, and not too long after, it began to stretch its small jaws open. Just as the snake was less than a foot away from him, the cross-legged Jian Chen suddenly opened his eyes. A cold glint appeared in his eyes as the light wind sword appeared in the palm of his right hand and stabbed at the python with an extremely quick speed. PCH. The light wind sword accurately pierced into the area where the heart was located. With such a large amount of sword chi, the python's heart was instantly ruptured. Not even looking at the python, he reclaimed the light wind sword into his body and continued to sit down next to the tree. Closing his eyes, he continued to try to recover his spirit. While it looked like he was in a deep meditative state like a monk, in actuality, he was keeping close track of his environment. In an area where magical beasts roamed about, he didn't dare be careless as he tried to recover his saint force. The 4 or 5 foot long python fell from the tree trunk now that it was powerless to stay coiled around it. As it dropped, it released a deep hissing sound before struggling on the ground for a moment before going still. After another 4 hours, Jian Chen opened his eyes once more and stood up on the tree branch. He took out another set of clothes from within his space belt and changed into them. Noticing that it was now dark, he began to think for a while before deciding on leaving the area. Jian Chen carefully looked around himself in case the Tianqiong clan was nearby. At this moment he had fully recovered from his wounds, and even his saint force was back to optimal conditions. Now that he was in the magical beast mountain range with its complicated terrain, Jian Chen was confident that if he were to come across Tianqiong Lai again, he would be able to easily retreat, unlike the fight before where it had occurred in open space. Just then, a small rustling sound came from behind. The moment he heard that sound, Jian Chen's heart stopped. He quickly leaped up onto a nearby tree branch that was hidden from view thanks to the leaves. Not too long after, a group of men wearing white slowly came into view. This type of lifestyle is exhausting. Having a group of us head into the magical beast mountain range in order to find just one person without even a single portrait. How are we supposed to look then? One of the white-robed mercenaries complained to the others. That's right, we don't even know what this person looks like. Even if we were to come across him, how would we even recognize him? A bearded middle-aged man said. My fellow brothers, do you know exactly why the clan leader wanted us to look for this man so badly? A person said curiously. I've heard that Tianxiong Kong was killed by this man. Tianxiong Kong is the sole heir to our Tianxiong clan. You tell me, if your son was killed, wouldn't you be furious? Then of course the clan leader would definitely want to catch this murderer. I've heard the Tianxiong clan has already sent 300 of its members into the magical Beast Mountain range. Among all those people, the weakest members are great saints while there's around 30 saint masters. With the clan leader dispatching that many people into the mountain range, do you think we'll be able to catch the murderer? After all, the magical Beast Mountain range is huge, and it's hard to say if that man has already escaped from here or not. That can't be said for sure, but according to the news, the murderer had already been heavily injured by the clan leader. In this giant forest, even if he were to escape, he wouldn't get far. The group of mercenaries began to idly talk as if they were taking a stroll instead of hunting someone. Just as these mercenaries walked under the huge tree, the leaves above suddenly swayed as a person darted out with his light-winged sword ready to stab into the group below. PCH. Just as these mercenaries tilted their heads up, the sword had already stabbed in between a man's eyebrows. Everyone be careful, someone's attacking. Someone was fast to respond, but before he could even finish his sentence, the light-winged sword blurred momentarily before stabbing into his throat. Chapter 140, The Tianxiong clan's retreat. By that point, the rest of the mercenaries finally overcame their surprise and took out their saint weapons to fight. The sword-wielding swordsman turned himself over in the air and dodged the incoming strikes before gracefully landing on the ground. The sword chi radiating from his sword slowly covered the air around it. It soon also enshrouded the mercenaries within it as well. By the time the sword chi had dissipated, the Tianxiong clan members had all fallen to the ground with a hole in their throats. A trickle of blood leaked from their wounds out onto the earth below. Taking back his sword, Jian Chen calmly looked at the grounded members before saying, "You've given me quite the useful amount of information. 30 saint masters and over 200 great saints, the Tianxiong clan really isn't weak at all. To think that they would send that many people into the magical Beast Mountain range to find me, it's no wonder they are the #1 clan in Wake City." Jian Chen became silent for a moment before his face slowly started to turn into a smile. "So if you aren't going to let me go, then don't blame me for being fierce. I'll play around with you then." In the blink of an eye, several days had passed, and in the span of those days, Jian Chen had roamed around the place and focused on dealing with the men from the Tianxiong clan. Although Jian Chen normally wasn't one for revenge, he also wasn't one to not fight back. After being provoked and bullied to such a state by the Tianxiong clan, if he didn't make a move, then he wouldn't be able to call himself Jian Chen. Already the amount of people killed by Jian Chen had reached somewhere in the 200 range. Among those, there were 10 Saint Master experts, the rest were all great saints. With a disastrous loss like this, even for the Tianxiong clan, it would be hard to recover from since they had been damaged down to their roots. The Tianxiong clan actually knew this well and clear, but they had taken no steps to remedy it. On the contrary, they had instead taken more members from their clan and had them search the magical Beast Mountain range in search of Jian Chen's footsteps. Tianxiong Lai definitely wanted to take revenge for his deceased son no matter how heavy a price he would have to pay. The events that had transpired for the past few days had been known to everyone in Wake City. The Tianxiong clan had been the main ruling power for over 10 years, so Tianxiong Lai's reputation could even be said to be very clear. The permanent residential mercenaries and merchants all knew who Tianxiong Lai was and how strong he was. The news that the heir of the Tianxiong clan, Tianxiong Kong, was killed and that Tianxiong Lai had brought a group of ferocious-looking mercenaries into the magical Beast Mountain range to find the assassin had caused a huge commotion in Wake City. This topic was spoken by mercenaries and merchants alike over a cup of tea and a plate of food. However, whoever was so audacious to kill Tianxiong, no one knew who that person was. The only thing they had known about this mysterious assassin was that he was an extremely young person. Every other detail was unknown. The other clans in Wake City had secretly observed the affairs of the Tianxiong clan. When they realized just how much damage the Tianxiong clan had taken while in the magical Beast Mountain range, each one of them had begun to prepare their clan to take over and divide up the shares of the Tianxiong clan in the market. The Tianxiong clan had controlled a large part of Wake City, causing every other clan to be incredibly jealous, but some of them had feared the power of the Tianxiong clan, so they had stayed patient. However, now that the Tianxiong clan had come across such an unexpected accident, their power was no longer the same. Many of the clans couldn't let this opportunity pass by them anymore, and began to stretch out with their hands for the Tianxiong clan's profits. In the magical Beast Mountain range, a group of 20 to 40-year-old worried mercenaries sat in a circle around each other. Clan leader, the situation isn't looking too good here. That brat is as treacherous as a devil and has also gained many experiences about how to hunt in a forest. We are at a disadvantage since he holds an advantage with the terrain and has already shaken us off his trail multiple times. Not only that, but this brat is also very strong. Many of the smaller groups didn't have the strength to kill him at all and eventually were destroyed. Even if his opponent is an expert of the Saint Master, he has been able to go against them all the same. So far the amount of people we brought into the magical Beast Mountain range has been reduced down to half, but I'm afraid that if things continue on like this, the amount of people we will have left would be countable on our hands. A middle-aged man said with concern. That's right, clan leader, that brat is far too cunning. If we group together, he takes on an ambush approach in a way that we don't get to see his face, and the moment we split up, he comes after us one by one. Not only that, but he is as nimble as a monkey in these forests, so we're unable to chase after him. What can we do about that? In our group right now, only my lord would be able to go up against this brat. Another mercenary said with the same amount of worry. Clan leader, right now we are at a disadvantage, it would be best to retreat for now and think things over. A frail-looking person said. Clan leader, right now since we have lost so many members in the magical Beast Mountain ranges, our development in Wake City will be halted. We cannot let that happen. Tianxiong clenched his fist in frustration as his face revealed a hesitant expression. In his heart a fierce struggle was being played. After some time, Tianxiong bit his lips and spoke out, "Tell everyone to retreat." Yes, clan leader. Upon hearing this order, each and every mercenary revealed a happy expression as their hearts secretly let loose a breath of air in relief. After facing Jianchen these past few days, not a single one of them wanted to throw away their lives. It was with good fortune that Tianxiong had been accompanying them. In their eyes, they were deeply afraid of coming across Jianchen without him. A person grabbed onto a bamboo shoot before setting the fuse on fire. With a shrill whistle, the bamboo shoot flew straight up into the air before exploding with a loud bang and transformed into a scarlet fog of smoke that scattered everywhere. Within the depths of the magical Beast Mountain range, there was a group of mercenaries that sat around in a circle and ate some pieces of meat. When this assassin will be captured, I don't know. The amount of casualties our Tianxiong clan has accumulated has already reached over a large amount. 10 Saint Masters have already died. To be able to kill Saint Masters with ease, with us having only the strength of a great saint, I don't know how long it'll be before we become a target for him. As long as we don't come across him, we'll be fine. Otherwise, we won't have a life to return home with. The mercenaries sat around the fire and chattered among themselves with worry. At that moment, a loud shrill sound spiraled into the sky. Hearing that, every single mercenary looked up past the tree canopy to see the blossoming fireworks in the sky, leading to a few mercenaries crying out in relief. That's our Tianxiong clan's retreat signal. One of the mercenaries cried out in joy. We can finally return home. What's everyone doing just standing around? Let's hurry up and go home. did you guys want to stay around here or something? That assassin could come at any time and slaughter us like livestock. Right, let's hurry up and go. This isn't a place we should stick around. After that, no one was in the mood to eat their food and immediately left the place. Not too long after they left, a shadow dropped down from the trees. This figure was wearing the leather of a magical beast, and already there was the beginning signs of a beard growing on his face. Seeing the group of mercenaries fade out from sight, the figure revealed a sneer. So you want to retreat? That's fine, but just this last time, I hope you let loose one final stream of blood. Whoever offends Jian Chen, will not be able to leave so easily. Chapter 141, Where is he? Now that the Tianqiong clan had renounced their search for Jian Chen, they all immediately started to retreat from the magical beast mountain range. At the sight of the firework, they all started to move out quickly. However, Jian Chen didn't plan on letting the Tianqiong clan off that easily. Although, there wasn't much he could do against Tianqiong Lai, against those great saints and saint masters, he could easily make do with them. Although the magical beast mountain range usually made it difficult to find other mercenaries, the Tianqiong clan mercenaries were all wearing white and had the Tianqiong emblem on their robes, so finding them was an easy task. Occasionally, the sounds of battle could be heard in the mountain range. Even as the Tianqiong clan members retreated, many groups still came across Jian Chen and were killed. He had accumulated months of rich experience after living in the magical beast mountain range and could appear and disappear like a ghost with the help of the complicated terrain. His surprise attacks caused his enemies to be unable to defend themselves. Even the times when Jian Chen was discovered by mercenaries, Jian Chen still surprised and killed them in the end with a single strike. Even if Jian Chen was encircled by the experts of the Tianqiong clan, he could rely on his superior speed to escape into the forest without a trace. This had pained the Tianqiong clan greatly since none of them could chase him. Even the middle saint masters were unable to come up with a way to chase him. In half a day, all of the Tianqiong clan had finally gathered together. Seeing that only 100 people remained, Tianqiong Lai was very depressed. In the beginning, they had entered the magical beast mountain range with 1,000 mercenaries. He didn't think that in just a few days' time, they would lose over 400 members. To the Tianqiong clan, this was a serious loss. A serious glint of murderous intent radiated from Tianqiong Lai for a split second as his desire to kill Jian Chen had reached unprecedented levels. Not only did he kill his Kong heir, but he had even caused a tremendous amounts of damage to the Tianqiong clan. Right now Tianqiong Lai wanted to do nothing more than devour Jian Chen's flesh and drink his blood. Seeing the gloomy face on Tianqiong Lai, every mercenary in the vicinity felt a tightness in their throats. No one dared to say a word in case they invoked the wrath of Tianqiong Lai. At this moment, no one dared to say anything that could possibly offend him. Let's go. Tianqiong Lai waved his hand with a gloomy face. As he led them away from the area, he knew that after experiencing such a loss, it would be very hard to say that the Tianqiong clan was still the #1 clan in Wake City. The remaining Tianqiong mercenaries walked through the forest without any magical beasts daring to attack them. However, an air of depression emanated from this group. They were clearly listless, and their spirits were low. Behind them was a leather-wearing figure that was closely following them nimbly through the trees. He moved in a way that the nearby tall grass barely moved at all, and even though he was no more than 50 meters away from the Tianqiong group, the Tianqiong clan members did not notice him and continued to walk onward. Because of the loud sounds they were making, they were unable to hear the even more minute sounds that their follower was creating. The person behind them was very cautious. Using the tall grass to conceal his movements, he quickly followed close by. In a few seconds, he was within 20 meters without being noticed yet. At that moment, the bright and shiny glint of a sword appeared in the man's hands. Still hidden by the grass, the man disappeared into a blur and flew behind the backmost mercenary of the Tianqiong clan. Crossing over the 20 meters dividing him and the group of mercenaries, the man's sword glinted as it swished through the air and stabbed at the very last person in the group. The sword flashed several times as it moved at inconceivable speeds, stabbing through the necks of 5 mercenaries. Without stopping there, his silver sword became a blur once more as he stabbed at the throats of another 3 people in a split second. "Everyone be careful, that man's here." Just as those 8 mercenaries were killed in a lightning-fast speed, one mercenary finally came to the realization that they were under attack and yelled out a warning for everyone. Upon hearing the warning, every mercenary pulled out their saint weapon and stared around themselves. However, just as the first man spoke, the assailant had already retreated back into the foliage just as quickly as he appeared. "Stay still, don't even think about escaping." A roar boomed from behind as Tianqiong leaped forward with his axe in hand. Chasing after the man, the other 20 Saint Masters then followed suit. Seeing Tianqiong and the other Saint Masters chase after the man, the remaining Tianqiong clan members let out a breath of relief. Their previously nervous expressions laxed by a large amount as well. For the past few days, they had been terrorized by this man who had killed many of their strong brothers. It was with good reason that they were afraid of him, wondering just when it would be their turn to be the ones on the ground by his hands. Suddenly, just as they let out a sigh in relief, the tall grass split open as a silver sword flew out from it in a brilliant show of light. PCH. PCH. 2 mercenaries then fell to the ground with their throats stabbed through. This sudden movement had disturbed many men. The moment they saw this, each and every mercenary there had turned pale with fright. "Everyone be careful, he's here." Before the man could finish talking, a leather-wearing man came out from the dense foliage with his sword at the ready to stab into the nearest person. The remaining Tianqiong clan members all held their saint weapons up. Since they held the advantage with numbers, they all started to spread out in a ring to entrap the invading person inside. Even after being encircled, the leather-wearing person didn't have a frantic expression on his face. Holding his sword in his right hand, he continued to defend himself against the attacks that came at him from every direction. His speed was so fast, it caused his attackers to be speechless, but these men were only at the great saint level, so when it was his turn to attack, they saw little to no opportunity to dodge. Following the continuous string of collisions, the leather-wearing man lashed out with his sword, stabbing into the throats of 5 different mercenaries with a hazy glow of sword chi following his sword. After killing those 5 mercenaries, the man didn't continue fighting. Instead he opted to run from the encirclement. Entering the foliage, he disappeared without a trace as the remaining mercenaries were powerless to stop him. Not too long after his escape, an Earth-attributed saint force flew into the area as Tianqiong returned with the other Saint Masters. Looking around the area, all he could see was the corpses on the ground without any signs of their assailant. "Where is he?" Tianqiong roared furiously as he asked the mercenaries there. Chapter 142, Tianqiong clan's heavy losses. "He ran out over there." A person pointed to where the man ran off to. Hearing that, Tianqiong turned his glare over to where a mercenary pointed. At this moment, the tall grass was shaking slightly, because someone had only just recently passed through. There remained a clear trace of someone's trail. Tianqiong returned his gaze over to the dead bodies on the floor with a gloomy face. In the brief moment he was gone, another 15 people had died. He was afraid that if things continued on like this, he wouldn't even have 50 people by the time he left the Magical Beast Mountain range. With such heavy losses, there would be no way for the Tianqiong clan to recover from this. The 20 Saint Masters that had followed Tianqiong stood behind him silently. Looking at the dozen dead bodies on the ground, every single one of them had a face that was unprecedentedly serious. "Continue onward," Tianqiong ordered. After these past few days, he knew in his heart that in the complicated terrain of the Magical Beast Mountain range, he was completely unable to kill the youth that killed his son Kong Air. If things continued on like this, then his army would be utterly destroyed. For now, the current formation will be changed. Every 5 Saint Masters will spread out in one group for each of the 4 directions, and the great saints will be in the middle. Maintain this formation while moving forward. Tianqiong Lai spoke. For a youth that wasn't on his level, to reduce him to such a state was an unwashable disgrace. Soon after, the Tianqiong clan followed Tianqiong Lai's change in formation and continued to journey through the mountain range. Now that they had been attacked by surprise once, everyone was extremely vigilant of their surroundings, their eyes constantly swept around their surroundings, wary of suffering from another surprise attack. Tianqiong Lai stood in the center of the formation with his inner saint force constantly on the move inside his body. He just needed for the youth to appear once more. No matter what the position, Tianqiong Lai would be able to respond quickly. Tianqiong Lai's eyes swept the area in front of him as his ears trembled as he strained them to listen for any close-by movements. As long as you appear, even if there is a heavy cost, I will kill you. Tianqiong Lai resolved. The group walked through the dense forest slowly. In regards to this killer after them, they didn't dare to move too quickly in case they made noise that would mask over the minute sounds of their stalker. Just as the Tianqiong clan was about to step over the boundary where the tall grass stopped, the figure of a person darted out from the grass, and in a split second, he had stabbed through the hearts and throats of a few mercenaries. Don't even think about running away this time. Just as that mysterious figure had stabbed into the throats of a few mercenaries, an angry snarl came from the middle of the formation. Tianqiong Lai's gigantic earth-attributed axe flew out at him following the figure's movements. At the same time, the Saint Masters in the group immediately leapt forward with their saint weapons ready to slash at their foe. That man had no desire to fight with everyone. Reclaiming his saint weapon into his body, he darted out of the group and then out of sight into the tall grass once more. You all stay here, I will chase after him. Tianqiong Lai roared before dashing into the tall grass after the man. This area of grass was tall enough to completely conceal a person within its expanse, and that leather-wearing person was moving through the grass with a nimble and quick speed. Very rarely did he make a sloppy mistake, and he maintained that fast speed without making the tiniest of sounds, as if his body was gliding instead of running. Not a single bit of weight had touched the ground as he ran, it was like he was using the grass for support instead of the ground. You won't escape this time. If I don't kill you today, then I will never be able to remove this hatred from my heart. Tianqiong Lai chased after the man. His speed had already reached the very pinnacle of his limits as the Earth Saint force flew off like smoke from his legs. With his legs constantly stamping across the ground, he was no slower than the man he was chasing. The leather-wearing man began to constantly change directions, and so too did Tianqiong Lai, who was following closely behind in the tall grass, yet he was unable to keep his eyes on the figure in front. Every so often he would have to jump into the air. At this moment, a fierce gale blew through the tall grass, creating a crashing sound throughout the area and causing Tianqiong Lai, who was chasing after the man, to pale. Stamping off of the ground, he leaped into the air and examined the ground below only to become dejected. He had lost sight of the man's traces. This damnable wind didn't come early or late, instead, it came right on time so that I lost sight of that man. Examining his surroundings, Tianqiong Lai had a face full of resentment, and couldn't help but curse out in anger. Afterward, he leaped into the air once more, unwilling to give up. Looking down, he tried to find traces of the man, but he could not because of the gale that was still continuing to blow, causing all of the tall grass to constantly sway in the wind and making tracking impossible. I definitely won't let you go. If you're a man, then leave behind your name. Tianqiong Lai roared up at the sky. His voice scattered through the air, causing echoes to be heard from far away. Not too long after, a clear laughter could be heard. Ha ha ha, this one is called Jian Chen. Tianqiong clan, one day I will make another visit, so until that day comes, I hope the clan leader will not worry about me. Jian Chen. Good, good, good. I, Tianqiong Lai, swear that even if you escape to the ends of the earth, I will find you. You won't ever escape. Tianxiong Lai roared. This time, there was no response. Tianxiong Lai couldn't reply anymore, and instead continued to lead the remaining Tianxiong clan members out of the magical beast mountain range. Very quickly they walked away from the grassy areas, and because of that, they no longer came across any surprise attacks. Returning to Wake City, Tianxiong Lai immediately traveled to the Mercenary Union and placed a high bounty on Jian Chen of 10,000 purple coins for the capture of him alive with his details posted under. Right afterward, the entire Wake City exploded with activity once more. 10,000 purple coins. Such an expensive bounty was a never-before-seen event in Wake City history, and a price this high was rare to see in the entire Tianyuan continent. To add on to that, the Mercenary Union had bumped up the mission grade to a rank, making it a special mission. It wasn't restricted to just mercenaries, as this mission was then sent out to the following nations neighboring the Blue Wind Kingdom. Right at this moment, Jian Chen wasn't aware that the warrant for his capture had been put up with such a high price once more. Right now, he was still in the magical beast mountain range washing his body. My current strength should be around the peak Great Saint tier already. These next few days, I should hunt for a few magical beasts in the mountain range and make a breakthrough into the Saint Master level. This way, if I come across Tianxiong Lai in the future, I won't be considered a weak opponent to him. Jian Chen thought to himself as he quickly made plans for the future. Chapter 143, Tortoise Beast, AI. Suddenly, Jian Chen let out a sound of surprise from the water edge. After he had washed away the sweat and filth, he stared at his body, only to discover that his skin had surprisingly turned a deep shade of red, completely unlike his usual skin color. What's going on here? How did my body turn red? Jian Chen cried out in astonishment with his eyebrows raised. After thinking about it for some time, his face relaxed and he broke out into a smile. Muttering to himself excitedly, he said, "This is what the book said would happen. This situation means that the anti-venom of the silver-striped golden snake has completely fused with my bloodstream. I didn't think that it would fuse together in only a month's time, nor did I think that the anti-venom of the silver-striped golden snake coursing through my body would make such a change. If my body continues to refine the 1000 immunity, then it will eventually gain the ability to reproduce the anti-venom on its own, and by then, I will have truly perfected the 1000 immunity. Once I perfect the 1000 immunity, all of the blood that my body makes will naturally contain the anti-venom. So I don't need to worry about my body losing any blood with anti-venom anymore." Jian Chen carefully inspected his body just in case there was any other changes to it other than his skin becoming a red color. However, there were no other changes, everything else was exactly the same as before. Jian Chen leapt out of the river to where his crude leather clothes were, and began to change into them. Since he had decided to cultivate in the magical beast mountain range until he broke through to Saint Master level, Jian Chen didn't want to switch out of his simple clothing. He hadn't had enough time to buy a new set of spare clothes during his last return to Wake City from the mountain range, since he was unwilling to fill his space belt with countless amounts of clothes that would just be wasted out here. Because of the complicated terrain and all of its thistles and thorns, any clothes worn here would be quickly ruined. Even if he did bring several sets of clothes, he wouldn't want change into them just for that reason. Jian Chen continued on deeper into the mountain range where the Class 3 magical beasts roamed, staying there for a few days. As the next couple of days passed, Jian Chen continued on as usual. In the daytime, he would look for the traces of magical beasts and kill them. At night, he would use the monster cores to cultivate. However, because he hadn't prepared any repellent herbs for mosquitoes and other poisonous insects, every night was a night of torment for him as they harassed Jian Chen. It was a good thing that Jian Chen had the primary step of the 1000 immunity down, so he didn't have to worry about the poisonous bites of the insects. Plus, because he could control Light Saint Force, the remaining swelling or other injuries he did sustain were immediately treated, and disappeared without a trace. During the past few days, Jian Chen had already reached the peak Great Saint level. Adding on to the fact that he had been fighting Class 3 magical beasts every day, his originally exquisite swordplay became even more perfect from this refinement. As his strength grew, the power of his physical body also gradually increased. Although it was still far from reaching invulnerability, it undoubtedly provided him an extremely durable body that could fully utilize his nimble swordplay. After all, if he wanted to increase his speed, the toll on his body would be extremely high. If his body's resilience wasn't enough, a simple fist that used all his strength would most likely cause his arm to throb in pain, as if blood wasn't flowing through it. If he ceaselessly maintained his lightning-fast swordplay, the greatest merit it would provide would be in his cultivation of the profound Azulite sword law, especially for its first layer of techniques, refined body. It would not only help strengthen every cell in Jian Chen's body, it would also make his body softer and yet still possess an exceedingly strong toughness. Under these various conditions, Jian Chen's weaknesses were worked in a way that improved and helped condition Jian Chen's sword strokes to be even harder to dodge. After becoming a great saint, killing Class 3 magical beasts was a great deal easier than before. Nearly 40 magical beasts died from Jian Chen's hands every day. Right now, somewhere in the Magical Beast Mountain Range, Jian Chen and another gigantic Class 3 magical beast were fighting. The magical beast was the size of several cattle, and its entire body was covered with fine scales as a layer of defense. Jian Chen's body was like a speed demon as he continued to run in circles around the magical beast. The light wind sword in his hand was like a sharp silver ray of light as it continuously struck against the scales of the magical beast. The density and toughness of the scales on the magical beast were extraordinary, so even if Jian Chen really wanted to break through them, he would have a hard time doing so. In addition, the magical beast was humongous. Even if the light wind sword did pierce through the beast's body, the blade would not harm the beast in the slightest, unless fatal. Just as the magical beast started to shake, Jian Chen saw his chance. In a flash of lightning, he stabbed at the throat of the magical beast and pierced straight through it. Unfortunately, after Jian Chen stabbed through its throat, the magical beast still did not die. Letting out a destitute roar, it began to charge at Jian Chen with a ferocity even more intense than before. This tortoise magical beast is at the peak of a Class 3 magical beast level. It is even about to reach the Class 4 magical beast level, no wonder its vitality is this strong. It seems that if I want to take care of this quickly, I will have to take action from within his body. Otherwise, unless I behead it will be very difficult to kill. Jian Chen muttered as he looked at the magical beast in front of him. Not only was the magical beast strong in terms of defense, but its vitality was extraordinary as well. Even after Jian Chen had stabbed into its throat, it still didn't die, rather, the matter had infuriated it further. While Jian Chen and this tortoise magical beast were battling, a group of mercenaries came into the battlefield. There were 20 men in that group with faces so filled with mud, that aside from their ages, no other distinguishing traits were visible. About half of them were wearing leather-skinned clothing while the other half had clothes that were in extremely poor conditions. 2 of the mercenaries were even wrapped up completely in bandages, their blood could easily be seen bleeding underneath the wrappings, signifying that they were heavily wounded. The moment this group of mercenaries saw the tortoise magical beast fight with Jian Chen right in front of their eyes, they immediately let out a surprised shout. That seems to be Jian Chen. Chapter 144, Black Leopard Mercenaries. Hearing this, the entire group of mercenaries became startled and looked over at Jian Chen with careful eyes. A medium-sized build around the age of 20 years old. Wields a slender-sized silver long sword with rapid speeds while being nimble. Captain, this man resembles the one on the bounty posters put up by the Tianxiong clan in the mercenary union. In my opinion, this is definitely Jian Chen. A leather hide-wearing mercenary said next to another mercenary whose clothes were still intact. That's right, Captain, I'm absolutely sure this person is Jian Chen. The Tianqiong clan has put out a 10,000 purple coin reward for the capture of Jian Chen. If we can capture him, then those 10,000 purple coins will be ours. Another shriveled mercenary spoke. Another man spoke out softly, I can see that this Jian Chen won't be so easy to handle. Do you guys not see how he is single-handedly fighting against that Class 3 magical beast? What are you afraid of? No matter how awesome he is only one person while we are many. Don't tell me you're afraid of a single person. If word of this spreads out, then our black leopard mercenaries will have no face left to preserve in Wake City. Another leather hide-wearing mercenary said with a muffled voice. What he's saying is right. Even if he's amazing, he's still only one person. Could it be that our black leopard mercenaries are afraid of a single 20-year-old kid? At that moment, a calm-looking person opened his mouth. Okay, everyone stop arguing. Listen to the captain's opinion. After he had finished speaking, everyone had stopped talking and turned to look at the person who was at the front of the group. Out of everyone in the mercenary group, only he could be considered to have clothes that were in perfect condition. He was the leader of the Black Leopard mercenaries. The leader of the Black Leopard mercenaries was very tall at the height of 2.5 meters and had a sturdy build. The hair on his head was cut to a short length on his large face, but it was rather ordinary to look at, and one would have trouble remembering the details of him if asked. He was wearing black robes that only had a few scratches from the thistle and thorns of the forest. The leader of the Black Leopard mercenaries stared closely at the battle between Jian Chen and the tortoise magical beast with a look of hesitancy. After a few moments of unwavering emotions reflected across his eyes, he finally came to a conclusion. No matter how amazing he is, he's still 20 years old after all, he can't be a match for the entire group of ours. Besides, there is only one Class 3 magical beast fighting against him. Let's wait for the beast to consume all of his saint force and deal him some damage before we immediately capture Jian Chen and bring him to the Tianqiong clan for that 10,000 purple coin prize. What a marvelous decision, Captain. This matter is over then, our group will definitely flourish. 10,000 purple coins, even after splitting it, this will be enough for our entire lifetime. One person sighed happily. After this is over, I will definitely go to Romance City and have Lady Yunxiu serve me for a few days. Another mercenary laughed. Hee, Jiali, every time that brothel from Romance City is mentioned, you begin to drool. It's a shame you have never had the money to enjoy its pleasures. Wait until this is over, then you will be able to take that Yunxiu back home as your wife without any problems. A man with a beard had laughed. Hearing that, the previous mercenary laughed and then stared at Jian Chen almost as if he were staring at a mountain of gold. Ao! At that moment, a blood-curdling roar came from far away. The mercenaries looked at the origin only to see Jian Chen had stabbed into the tortoise's throat. There was a strong amount of sword qi that not only stabbed into its throat, but straight into its body with an explosive entrance before impacting against its inner organs. The tortoise continued to shriek as its gigantic body froze up and slowly crashed into the ground with a resounding boom. Forward! Just as the tortoise magical beast fell to the ground, the leader of the Black Leopard mercenaries led his group toward Jian Chen with the rest of the mercenaries following straight behind. The expression on Jian Chen's face didn't change at all. Slowly pulling out his light wind sword from the throat of the tortoise magical beast, he walked to the belly of the beast as if nothing were happening, and with a flash of a large amount of sword qi, he thrusted his sword deep into its stomach. Immediately, a large wound appeared on the belly as Jian Chen stabbed deep within. A blood-stained item then flowed out with the blood before rolling to a stop in front of him. Jian Chen crouched down to the bloody earth and wiped the blood off the item, revealing it to be a small crystal. It was the tortoise's monster core. Seeing how Jian Chen hadn't even spared them a glance as if he held the Black Leopard mercenaries in disdain, the mercenary group suddenly felt gloomy. The leader of the mercenary group looked at Jian Chen and spoke. Jian Chen, I cannot determine your age, but you look very calm, especially in a moment like this where you should feel frantic instead. Jian Chen calmly stored the monster core into his space belt before raising his head up to look at the Black Leopard mercenaries to say calmly, "Who are you? How do you know my name?" Hearing that answer, the Black Leopard mercenaries' leader revealed a small cold smile. "We are the Black Leopard mercenaries. As for how we know your name, that's simple. Your name is of well-renown in Wake City especially, everyone knows who you are." Jian Chen scowled slightly. "Speak, what is your goal then?" "Our goal is simple, now if you will kindly go with us." Even before Jian Chen could speak, another mercenary had spoke up. "That's right, we only wish for you to come with us. Now be an obedient youngster, and our Black Leopard mercenaries won't treat you too badly." A shriveled mercenary laughed. Jian Chen revealed a cold smile. "This one isn't sure where you want to go." "Where else?" "Of course we go back to Wake City," a man said with a muffled voice. Hearing that city name, Jian Chen immediately guessed that this had to do with the Tianxiong clan. "And if I don't go back with you?" Jian Chen looked at the 20 mercenaries with a calm voice. No matter what angle they looked at him, not a single trace of fear could be seen on it. Hearing this, the members of the Black Leopard mercenaries began to laugh as one of the taller mercenaries took out his saint weapon. It was a 3-meter-long spear. "If you don't come back with us, then we will have to take you in by force." "Jian Chen, I presume you wouldn't want to feel any suffering," the captain of the Black Leopard mercenaries said. After hearing their leader, every other mercenary began to take out their own saint weapons, causing the air to fluctuate with the saint force as they stalked toward Jian Chen. Chapter 145, Yet Another Prophet. "Jian Chen, I'll give you one last chance. Come with us obediently and quietly, or we'll take you in by force. If you make us show our hand, then a beating will be hard to avoid." The leader of the Black Leopard mercenaries gave a level stare at Jian Chen, who didn't say a single word. Jian Chen then chuckled and revealed a smile full of disdain as he spoke, "With only your peak Saint Master strength, you don't have the qualifications to speak of such things to me. Today, we shall see if you will be able to capture me, or if each and every single one of you will die by my hand, one by one." As he spoke, a hazy glow of sword chi began to circulate around his light wind sword. Immediately afterward, Jian Chen's figure blurred as he moved toward the mercenary group. In an instant, he reappeared right in front of the weakest-looking mercenary, and swung his sword with a stunning speed. "You're looking for death. Brat, you're too arrogant." Just as Jian Chen began to move, the other members of the Black Leopard mercenaries all cried out in anger as they charged at him. "PCH! PCH! PCH!" The instant they took one step forward, Jian Chen stabbed into the throats of 3 mercenaries with lightning-quick speed. Since Jian Chen's attack was so sudden, those of the primary Great Saint level didn't have any time to react at all. Thus, the light wind sword pierced into their throats and ended their lives. Without any hesitation, Jian Chen pulled out his sword and began to fight with the surrounding Black Leopard mercenaries in an intense battle. Although they held the advantage in numbers, the number of enemies that were consistently trying to hit Jian Chen numbered only around 7. The rest surrounded Jian Chen so that he would have no way to escape. At the same time, they would be able to jump in at any time to provide assistance if needed. Among the 7 mercenaries that were fighting Jian Chen, there were 5 Saint Masters and 2 Great Saints. The people of the Black Leopard mercenaries weren't stupid, they knew that a person capable of incurring the wrath of the Tianxiong clan couldn't possibly be weak. Thus, the 5 Saint Masters attacked him at the same time. Jian Chen, however, was handling the 5 Saint Masters and the 2 Great Saints with ease. Previously, when he only had the strength of a middle Great Saint, he had already dared to face the many Saint Master experts of the Tianxiong clan. Obviously, now that his strength had already improved to the peak Great Saint level, he'd have no problem fighting these mercenaries. He was now only one step away from reaching Saint Master level. Although the increase in level from middle to peak Great Saint was a small one in name, Jian Chen's strength had multiplied greatly during this period. Now that he had peak Great Saint powers, the simultaneous attacks from the 5 Saint Masters wasn't as difficult to deal with as his previous experience in Wake City. Jian Chen's sword was unparalleled in speed, striking out in all directions as an offense and defense at the unbelievably fast speed of light. The light wind sword continued to collide with the other Saint weapons, causing metallic clanging sounds to screech out. After each collision, the strong amount of Saint force from the weapons would diffuse through the area, causing dust and smoke to pervade the air. Jian Chen's sword began to speed up even more as it blocked the other Saint weapons. It then flashed out like silver lightning, piercing 2 of the Great Saints' throats. Charlie. Cheng Buping. Seeing 2 people die in front of them, the Black Leopard mercenaries let out painful cries at the loss of their 2 Great Saints. Those who had a great relationship with the ones who had just died immediately roared in anger as they charged at Jian Chen. Jian Chen dodged out of the circle the Saint Masters had put up and began to fight intensely with the Great Saints. After a few flashes of his sword, more mercenaries had their throats and hearts pierced, and died as well. You dare to kill the members of our Black Leopard mercenaries? You're courting death, Jian Chen. The leader of the Black Leopard grew furious after seeing so many people die by the hands of Jian Chen, and he rushed toward to stab Jian Chen with his long spear. Almost as if he had eyes on the back of his head, Jian Chen suddenly turned around and thrusted his long sword out. Ding! The sound of steel meeting steel rang out as the silver light wind sword and the long spear clashed with each other in mid-air. As the 2 came into contact, Jian Chen didn't take a single step back. Instead, he stepped past the spear toward the captain, and with a flash of his blade, the light wind sword stabbed into the throat of the leader of the Black Leopard mercenaries. With a squelch, the tip of the bloody sword appeared on the other side of the man's throat. The leader of the Black Leopard mercenaries grew stiff as he stared at the sword in his throat with disbelief. His pupils rolled around furiously as he stared at Jian Chen and spoke with difficulty, How could how could I, die by your hand? Captain. Captain. Captain Cargill. Seeing their leader stabbed through his throat, the expressions of all the mercenaries changed. After standing there in a daze for a while, they all began to shout in alarm. He has killed Captain Cargill. My brothers, let's avenge the captain's death, avenge Captain Cargill, everyone forward, kill this Jian Chen. The mercenaries suddenly became motivated once more as they charged at Jian Chen. How reckless! Jian Chen sneered as he pulled out his sword. The blade flashed as he charged towards the foremost people, instantly penetrating a few more throats. Jian Chen's figure nimbly flashed through the crowd as he stabbed out at the people with wild abandonment. The mercenaries fighting against him fell one by one as they faced up against Jian Chen's superbly fast sword. Those who had the strength of a great saint didn't have the ability to defend themselves. Even the Saint Masters weren't able to hold up for very long. In a short moment, another 10 mercenaries had died at Jian Chen's sword, leaving behind 2 Saint Masters and 4 great saints. The 6 people had already lost their wills to fight. They exchanged mutual looks with each other, knowing that continuing on this road would end with death. The only road left to take was to run. With this thought, the 6 mercenaries immediately spread out in 4 directions without any hesitation in an effort to escape Jian Chen. Jian Chen sneered. His gaze swept across the area, eventually landing on a great saint mercenary. His body flickered slightly as he chased after the great saint with extreme speed. As for the other 5 mercenaries, Jian Chen took no heed of them. That great saint who had been trying to escape from Jian Chen's pursuit was blocked off by him in the blink of an eye. You! What are you going to do? Seeing Jian Chen appear right in front of him, the mercenary's face grew pale as he began to shake and timidly pulled out his saint weapon. The light wind sword disappeared from Jian Chen's hand as he crossed both arms across his chest. Staring at the mercenary who was close to his age, he said indifferently, "Do you wish to live?" "Of course." That mercenary replied almost instantaneously. But the question then registered in his mind, and his expression grew hopeful as he asked incredulously, "Could it be you're willing to let me go? Letting you go won't make much of a difference to me, and killing you will have no meaning either. As long as you cooperate with me and tell me what I need to know, then I will let you go." Hearing Jian Chen, the mercenary revealed a joyful expression. "Okay, as long as you let me go, I will definitely tell you all I know without hiding a single thing." Jian Chen nodded his head and said, "Let me ask you, what method is the Tianqiong clan using to deal with me, and how did your group recognize me?" Without hesitation, the mercenary immediately replied, "The Tianqiong clan used the mercenary union to place a 10,000 purple coin bounty on you. At the same time, they publicized some of your traits. That's why we immediately recognized you as the person that the Tianqiong clan had placed a high bounty of based on your fight with the tortoise beast." Jian Chen frowned. The Tianqiong clan placing such a high bounty on his capture was something far out of his expectations. After some hesitation, Jian Chen's eyes brightened as he smiled darkly, "I can let you go now, but you must do one task for me." "What task?" "As long as I, Shu Kellen, can find a way, I will definitely do it." That mercenary vowed in an exceptionally resolute tone, most likely in hopes of Jian Chen believing him. "When you return to Wake City, I want you to spread the news everywhere that I am in the Magical Beast Mountain Range. I want everyone to know that I am here, do you understand?" Jian Chen stared firmly at him. "Understood, I understand." Although he didn't know what Jian Chen was up to, this mercenary still immediately replied to him without asking questions. He was afraid that if he made Jian Chen angry, his life would be forfeit. Jian Chen thought for another second before continuing, "Also, tell them that I am seriously injured, got it?" "Got it, got it. Don't worry, I will definitely tell everyone what you want to be said." The mercenary hurriedly replied. Jian Chen nodded his head and waved his hand, "You can go." Almost as if that man had received an amnesty, he immediately began to run as fast as he could away from the area. Based on his appearance, it seemed as if he was afraid that Jian Chen would change his mind and take his life in the end. Jian Chen looked at the dozens of corpses on the ground and took their space belts. Walking over to a clean area, he began to take inventory of the things in each space belt. In the end, there was over 100 monster cores, several dozen purple coins, 300 gold coins and a few other essentials. Chapter 146, Breakthrough into a Saint. Master Jian Chen looked through all of the monster cores the Black Leopard mercenaries had. Among the 100 monster cores, a great amount of them were Class 3 monster cores and the rest were Class 2 monster cores. Just seeing the amount of monster cores painstakingly collected was proof of how long the mercenaries had stayed in the mountain range. It was a shame that because of their greed, many of them had lost their lives by Jian Chen's hands, and their bountiful harvest of monster cores was taken from them for Jian Chen to use. Their rewards for their painstaking labor had been taken by someone else. Jian Chen happily stored the 100 monster cores into his own space belt. Although he could personally get 20 or 30 monster cores in a single day, these 100 monster cores were not a small amount. With this amount, he would be able to sustain his cultivation for a few days. I hope that mercenary has accomplished the task I gave him. 10,000 purple coins as a bounty isn't a small amount at all. I'm willing to bet many mercenaries will be tempted by it. Jian Chen muttered to himself before revealing an expectant smile. I hope there are enough monster cores in their bags, this will be a great source of profit. The wage for avarice is death. Since they are trying to deal with me as a result of being unable to resist temptation, they can't blame me for being merciless. As he spoke, a flash of murderous intent radiated from Jian Chen. For the next 2 days, I should work hard to improve my strength. Otherwise, if I come across a strong group, even though they may not be able to seize me, dealing with them will be quite difficult. Moreover, I still need to be able to defend myself from peak Great Saint Masters. With my current strength, going against peak Saint Masters isn't a problem, but if I come across a peak Great Saint Master, that could potentially be dangerous. If it doesn't go well, I might have to run away. While Wake City is only a Class 3 city with a few Great Saint Masters, that doesn't mean there are none to be seen. Just like the rarity of phoenix feathers and unicorn horns, nobody can guarantee that there wouldn't be any Great Saint Masters would come at me as a result of being unable to turn down the temptation of 10,000 purple coins. It seems that I need to quickly break through into the Saint Master level so that if I were to fight against Great Saint Master experts, I would still have a chance. After he made his plans, Jian Chen decided to not kill any more magical beasts and instead walked over to the side of a hill, where there was plenty of vegetation growing through the cracks of a steep rock face. Jian Chen walked up to the wall and gently pushed away the tall grass to reveal a hole. This cavern had been discovered by Jian Chen 2 days ago. Taking out a few materials from his space belt, he fashioned a torch and walked straight into the cavern. The passageway was very narrow, only one person would be able to walk over the uneven surfaces. Traces of handprints and footprints could be seen all over the place, showing that this cavern had been artificially expanded. Following the curved, 30-meter-long pathway, Jian Chen finally reached the end of the cavern. The circumference of the dead end was around 10 meters, and it had a height of 3 meters. The ground was very flat, and a stone table and bench sat nearby. 2 days before, when he had just discovered the cavern, Jian Chen had already known that others had stayed in this cavern for quite a while. However, a thick layer of dust covered the ground, clearly indicating that it had been ages since a person had last come here. After inspecting the cavern and confirming the security of it, Jian Chen stuck his torch onto the wall and sat down in the central point of the dead end while taking out a few Class 2 monster cores to cultivate. He was definitely safer in this hidden cavern compared to the open outside mountain range, and it allowed Jian Chen to freely enter a state of cultivation as he pleased. After hunting for a few days in the magical Beast Mountain range, he had amassed a large amount of monster cores. Adding on to the hundreds of monster cores he had gained from the Black Leopard mercenaries, the amount of monster cores in Jian Chen's possession was enough for him to cultivate for 1 full month. Jian Chen wasn't at all worried about a shortage of monster cores. The energy within the monster cores became absorbed into Jian Chen's body at alarming speeds. The powerful energy gathered around his body, and was already gradually condensing into an extremely weak light. Because of the azure and violet glows within his dantian, Jian Chen's cultivation rate had improved 100 times over, but at the same time, the 2 glows robbed him of his cultivation. Jian Chen would only see a small part of what he absorbed and cultivated. Despite this, his cultivation speed was still a bit faster than before. Within Jian Chen's dantian, the strong saint force began to form the hazy shape of a sword, although very blurry. It actually looked very similar to his light wind sword to the point where even the handle of the sword could be more or less distinguished. As Jian Chen continued to absorb the stream of energy within the monster cores, the sword within his dantian began to condense with saint force slowly as it expanded outwards. According to this speed, I will soon be able to break through into the Saint Master level. I estimate that it should take me from 10 days to half a month. But still, that won't do, that is too slow. Jian Chen furrowed his eyebrows in thought. Because of his dantian, all of the energy from the monster cores was being robbed from him, causing him to feel a bit dissatisfied. Let's see if I can take that energy back. Suddenly, Jian Chen's heart shook as he began to concentrate on stealing the energy back from the 2 glows in his dantian. However, the speed in which the azure and violet glow was absorbing the energy was far too fast. Even when using all of his strength, he was only able to take back a small amount of energy. Despite this result, Jian Chen was still extremely satisfied. With this small amount of energy, his cultivation speed had improved by a good 10 or 20%. If he were to continue with this speed, it wouldn't take him more than a few days to make the breakthrough. In the cavern, Jian Chen was in a deep state of cultivation, but outside of the magical Beast Mountain range in Wake City, the entire city was in an uproar. When the news had escaped from the mercenary's mouth, no one knew whether or not it was genuine, but it had still caused every single mercenary to give it some thought. This person had a bounty placed on him for 10,000 purple coins. Although he was in the magical Beast Mountain range, he was alone and badly injured, so his strength would be sharply declining. This piece of unconfirmable news had made many mercenaries travel to the magical Beast Mountain range in hopes to confirm it. They had to make sure since it was 10,000 purple coins, and since the target was only a young man who was barely 20 years old, this was a simple task in the eyes of many people. The only trouble they would be to locate him. With a mission that had a target like this, there weren't many people that could resist the temptation of 10,000 purple coins. Despite many people telling them that the target this time was not weak at all and had even caused the Tianxiong clan to take a heavy loss, these mercenaries still had no fear. After a few days of Jian Chen staying in the magical Beast Mountain range, many cities around Wake City had already heard the news of Jian Chen being seriously injured. Many mercenaries had already begun to rush towards Wake City in huge numbers. Seeing the situation swell up like this, a few of the lone mercenaries who had confidence in their strength and luck looked toward the magical Beast Mountain range. To them, they would take advantage of this situation for their own advantage. In a flash, 7 days had passed. In the caverns of the magical Beast Mountain range, Jian Chen was sitting with his legs crossed on the ground while he cultivated. The torch on the wall had long since been extinguished, causing it to be completely pitch dark to the point of not being able to see his hands in front of his face. These past few days, Jian Chen had been in a cultivational state for almost the entire time. With the continuous increase in his inner saint force, Jian Chen could clearly feel that his strength was improving by leaps and bounds. While he had cultivated, he didn't move a single inch, aside from the times he needed to change the monster cores in his hand. Although, once he swapped the monster cores, he would go straight back to cultivating. Jian Chen hadn't eaten a single meal or took a sip of water while cultivating. He had sunk into such a deep meditational state that he had almost felt no hunger or thirst. In those days, a third of the monster cores in Jian Chen's space belt had already been used up. Surrounding him was the dust left behind by the spent monster cores piled up in a fine layer, especially on his crossed legs. Chapter 147, Identity revealed. At that moment, a wave of intense energy pulsed out from Jian Chen's body. At this hour, his cultivation speed had gone up by another noticeable amount, yet the energy from within the monster cores was pouring out like stampeding horses. It was already too much for Jian Chen to handle, and so the energy floated in the air around him, looking like a dense white cloud of fog. In the cavern, this fog was extremely noticeable as it floated about him. In fact, Jian Chen's body had begun to light up with the fog surrounding him, making his body stand out in the dark cavern. At the same time, all of his pores expanded to a larger size, almost as if they were the mouths of thirsty children. The white mist-like fog around Jian Chen then began to be swallowed into his body to be used as an energy source, consumed for Jian Chen's cultivation. As the pores on Jian Chen's body began to swallow the energy around him, he began to also feel a slightly painful sensation within his body. It was almost as if he had multiple insects crawling around his body and taking bites. With such an annoying and irritating sensation like this, any person would feel it deep within their hearts. As Jian Chen sat on the ground of the cavern with a peaceful look, he looked like a monk deep in meditation. Despite his peaceful demeanor, he could still feel the pain within his body. However, if one were to look at him, they would not be able to tell he was experiencing any pain. Meanwhile, within his body the energy that was absorbed through his pores was gathering within his dantian, where it was then absorbed by the sword within it. As the saint weapon absorbed the energy, it began to slowly change in a way that the shape of the sword grew more distinguished. All of the energy it had accumulated had added itself to its strength, and with each second the energy was absorbed, the saint weapon grew in length and size. Right now, Jian Chen was already at the threshold of breaking through into a saint master. This show continued on for 4 more hours until the monster core in Jian Chen's hand started to flicker. Immediately, Jian Chen took out a few Class 3 monster cores and began to cultivate again. Time slowly but silently went by, and not too long after, half of the day had been spent. Within the darkness of the cavern, the hazy figure of Jian Chen could be seen cultivating while the white, fog-like energy grew even more condensed, to the point where it was lighting up like moonlight. At that moment, an intense amount of energy flew out from Jian Chen and reverberated all over the cavern. The energy grew more and more intense as it eventually evolved into a squall that roared throughout the cavern. The dust kicked up everywhere and was scattered by the squall of energy. All of the dust surrounding Jian Chen had been blown in every direction as the white fog swirled around frantically, before finally entering Jian Chen's body. In the blink of an eye, Jian Chen had completely absorbed it all at a pace that was far faster than his original speed. With his current strength, he had finally made the breakthrough from a great saint to a saint master. Just as Jian Chen had made his breakthrough into the next level, the 2 glows within his dantian had suddenly stopped stealing the energy from Jian Chen. Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes from his sitting position when all of a sudden a weak, mysterious glow came out from his eyes. Although it was weak, in the darkness of the cavern, it was very noticeable. Feeling that the saint force within his body was incomparably stronger than it was before, Jian Chen let loose an excited smile. Immediately, he brought out his light wind sword to his hand, which emitted a weak glow of light from its blade that dispersed the nearby darkness. An amazing glow gleamed within Jian Chen's eyes as in the next moment, a large amount of silver light was released from the blade as a strong amount of sword chi appeared. Lunging forward, the light wind sword was thrust through the air as a small amount of sword chi separated itself from the sword and shot toward the cavern walls with amazing speed. Within the dark cavern, that silver glow of sword chi shot out like lightning towards the cavern wall without a sound. The moment it struck against the wall, the sword chi disappeared, but not before leaving behind a hole from its impact. Jian Chen's body wavered slightly as he flew toward the wall like a demon possessed and struck out with his sword. PCH. Following the loud sound, the cliff that was stabbed by the light wind sword seemed almost as weak as tofu. The entire blade of the light wind sword had completely inserted itself into the wall and only the handle could be seen. The moment the light wind sword had stabbed into the wall, Jian Chen hadn't felt the slightest amount of obstructions from the momentum, making him feel as if the wall was a piece of bean curd instead of a stone wall. Although Jian Chen could easily stab into a stone wall in the past, it was not as easy as it was now. Slowly pulling out his sword, Jian Chen's heart was filled with confidence. If he were to go against Tianxiong Lai, although he might not win against him, he would at least be able to put up a good fight. Now that his strength was at the Saint Master level, Jian Chen was no longer worried if he were to come across a group of mercenaries. Even if there was a great Saint Master within their ranks, he would at least be able to run away if need be. Recollecting his light wind sword, Jian Chen dusted himself off from all the dust and ignited the fire once more, basking in the glow of the fire instead of the darkness for once. When Jian Chen exited from the cavern, 5 days had already passed. The intense sun was floating high in the sky, indicating that it was noon. Jian Chen calmly looked around himself before setting off in a random direction. I hope that mercenary from the Black Leopard mercenaries did not let me down. Walking into the tall grass-infested forest, Jian Chen muttered to himself. Now that he was a Saint Master, his fighting strength was much higher, and within Wake City, there would definitely be very few people that could contend with him. Jian Chen began to idly stroll through the magical Beast Mountain Range. In this part of the mountain range, Class 2 and 3 magical beasts often strolled through the area. In the past, Jian Chen had to be careful as he walked through this area, but now, as long as he didn't come across another monster on the same level as the golden-striped silver snake, even if it was a Class 3 magical beast, he wouldn't have to worry. Just then, Jian Chen's ears trembled as he heard the soft sound of chatter from the direction in front of him. Jian Chen's line of sight was obstructed due to the extremely dense vegetation and couldn't see who was talking beyond the trees. "Harry, we've been searching this area for days and circled around the magical beast mountain range many times already. And yet we still haven't come across anyone that looks like Jian Chen. Do you think Jian Chen is still here? What if he already escaped without a trace? Fiji, you can stop your complaining. The magical beast mountain range is huge with wild grass everywhere. Searching for a single person in this place is difficult, surely you understand that. Besides, the reports say that Jian Chen is heavily injured. Even if he wanted to run, he wouldn't be able to go far. I'm not even sure if he's currently hiding somewhere trying to heal. That's right, I'm sure that Jian Chen's hiding somewhere with heavy wounds not daring to come out. But it's still so troublesome. Many people have already entered the mountain range, and if Jian Chen wasn't in a secret hiding spot, he would have long since been discovered by a group of people or even eaten by a magical beast. There's some truth to that, but we better slowly look for now. Even if we don't find him, we'll be able to kill a few magical beasts and take their monster cores to cultivate with." As soon as that last line was spoken, the group pushed past some tall grass and walked out onto the road where they could see Jian Chen clearly in front of them. They could see Jian Chen wearing animal leather and his face hidden by the accumulated filth of his time on the mountain range. The moment they saw Jian Chen, the mercenaries looked blankly at him. At the same time, Jian Chen took in the group in front of him. There was a total of 7 or 8 people in front of him with their ages looking to be around 30 years old. Their faces had traces of sweat and filth and their clothes were in a tattered condition, showing that they had been staying in the magical beast mountain range for a few days at the very least. One of the mercenaries walked forward to speak to Jian Chen. "Fellow friend, judging from your appearance, I presume you've been at the magical beast mountain range for quite some time now." Jian Chen's face revealed a smile as he replied, "That's right, I've been here on this mountain range for quite a few days." "Then I'm not sure if this friend has heard about the most recent news from Wake City?" the man asked Jian Chen as he looked at him. Hearing this, Jian Chen had a thoughtful look to him. "This one is not sure if you are talking about the one named Jian Chen." "Correct, it is indeed about him. It would appear that this friend has indeed come into this magical beast mountain range looking for Jian Chen. Judging by your appearances, I presume you've been in the mountain range for longer than we have. But perhaps, do you know any news about Jian Chen?" the mercenary said. "News about Jian Chen?" Jian Chen's smile grew strange as he nodded. "You've asked the right person. Indeed, I know the whereabouts of Jian Chen." "What? You know where Jian Chen is?" Hearing this, the entire group of mercenaries were startled. Due to the words from this mercenary, everyone adopted a joyous expression on their faces. This was what they had wanted to hear, but they hadn't expected to hear it from this animal hide-wearing mercenary. They didn't think that this question they had thrown out casually would be answered in such a way. "Fellow friend, where might Jian Chen be?" this one asks. A mercenary asked impatiently. To him, Jian Chen was like a mountain of gold, and so he didn't bother to think if he had the strength to fight him. Jian Chen was still smiling as he slowly said, "Not even far away, but right in front of your eyes." Jian Chen looked at them with a curious stare. "Seeing so many mercenaries trying to find me, it would seem that the 10,000 purple coin bounty from the Tianxiong clan has enticed many people." Jian Chen thought to himself. "Not far away, but right in front of our eyes." Hearing Jian Chen, the mercenaries all repeated what he said under their breaths in thought. Very quickly the mercenaries came to a realization as they snapped their heads at him and stared in disbelief. "What? You're Jian Chen?" Chapter 148, Spare Us. As the mercenaries cried out, their eyes landed on Jian Chen with shock written all over their faces. Not a single one of them had thought that after looking everywhere in the magical beast mountain range, they would coincidentally come across him. What was more amusing was just how exactly they came across Jian Chen. Another mercenary laughed bitterly as he stared at Jian Chen. "I say, fellow brother, you shouldn't joke around in such a manner just in case some idiot believes what you say and drags you off to the Tianqiong clan for the bounty." Hearing that mercenary, the other mercenaries saw the light and began to force a smile as well. The words Jian Chen had said had truly shocked them. "Fellow friend, right now Jian Chen's name is infamous around this area. It would be best for you if you refrain from joking around like that again, or else you risk having trouble come looking for you," a mercenary said. Not a single one of them believed that this animal hide-wearing person was the Jian Chen they were looking for. Jian Chen laughed and said, "Then what would you need to believe that I'm Jian Chen? According to what we know, Jian Chen's saint weapon is a thin long sword and is quite young. Around the age of 20 to be exact. His speed is quite fast, as is his sword strokes, to the point where even a few Saint Master experts aren't able to dodge them. It was said that because these Saint Masters weren't able to dodge his sword that they died by Jian Chen's hands," a mercenary said. A silver sword appeared in Jian Chen's hands. It was his light wind sword. Laughing, Jian Chen said, "Take a look, the sword Jian Chen uses, is it this one?" Hearing this, the mercenaries looked at the light wind sword in Jian Chen's hands with a curious look. "Ai! Look! This sword here has some resemblance." "That's right, it's quite similar, almost exactly the same." Right away, two mercenaries couldn't help but cry out. Hearing those two, the rest of the mercenaries began to grow serious as they looked at Jian Chen, their attitudes toward him slowly changing. "You really are Jian Chen?" A mercenary stared at the dust-filled face of Jian Chen. As the way things were now, these mercenaries had all came to the conclusion that this person in front of them was the person they had been painstakingly looking for. Jian Chen laughed as he said, "That's right, I am Jian Chen. The Jian Chen that has been chased by the Tianqiong clan. Right now, I stand here waiting to see if you can capture and take me back to Wake City for the bounty." Hearing that, the mercenaries began to laugh out loud as they looked at each other before one of the mercenaries cried out, "My brothers, surround him." With that command, a mercenary rushed toward Jian Chen while the rest of the mercenaries hesitated for a moment before charging along with him, surrounding Jian Chen in a circle. Just as Jian Chen absorbed the light wind sword, both of his hands rested against his chest as he looked at the mercenary surrounding him. With disdain, he said, "It would appear that many people were tempted by the 10,000 purple coin bounty, but I didn't think that even great saints would come to capture me as well. Could it be that you didn't hear about how many Saint Masters died by my hand, or do you think your strength surpasses those of the Saint Masters?" The mercenaries all looked at Jian Chen with some hesitation as they listened to him, but one of the mercenaries cried out, "Jian Chen, you can stop pretending to be brave. Right now, everyone knows that you are heavily injured, so your strength is nowhere near the same level as it was. It would be best for you if you were to come with us obediently, otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. By that point, don't say that we bullied you." Jian Chen shook his head helplessly as he muttered, "It seems that the money has really addled your brains to the point where you don't even care for your own lives. Forget it, I don't feel like speaking with you anymore." Jian Chen then stopped talking before his body shook slightly before appearing instantly right in front of a close-by mercenary. Making a fist with his right hand, he slammed it into the nose of that mercenary without any fancy movements. "Ah!" The mercenary cried out in agony as he held his nose in pain. Blood began to slowly drip down from it, and before long the entire bottom part of his face was covered with blood. Jian Chen's fist had broken his nose. After breaking that mercenary's nose, Jian Chen didn't stop there. Immediately kicking at his stomach, the man was sent flying back 5 meters. Immediately after, Jian Chen's body disappeared and reappeared right in front of another mercenary with a great amount of saint force circling his leg. With that leg, he lashed out at the chest of the mercenary. Bang, came the collision. The mercenary didn't have any time to react before being sent flying into the air with blood flying out from his mouth. Jian Chen, what a lowly person you are for using a sneak attack. Everyone forward, take him. After Jian Chen had attacked those two mercenaries, the rest of the mercenaries were brought back to awareness and flew at Jian Chen with their saint weapons ready to slash. Jian Chen nimbly dodged the attacks and dashed forward, and with his fists at the ready, he attacked a few of the mercenaries at a rapid pace, causing an endless stream of sounds to be heard. Now that Jian Chen was a saint master, he could easily take care of those at the great saint level without using his light wind sword. Every sword user thought their swords to be extremely important, and many viewed the sword to be akin to their second life. Jian Chen was no exception. Looking at these mercenaries in front of him, if he were to use his sword to kill these mercenaries, it would be like killing a chicken with a cow cleaver. Despite Jian Chen utilizing the art of Chinese boxing, these mercenaries were still powerless to respond. Within a few breaths, they had fallen to the ground with bloody noses and swollen faces. Jian Chen clapped his hands together as he looked at the pained mercenaries on the ground and laughed. Do you still believe you can take me in to get that reward? Lord Jian Chen, please spare us please. We were possessed and seduced to the point of foolishness by the thought of the reward. You must be generous, please spare us this time. A mercenary crawled from the ground and began to bow his head to Jian Chen while pleading in a loud voice. Chapter 149, Meeting the Zhou Mercenaries. Once more highlight above for chapter title. Seeing the mercenary continuously bow his head, Jian Chen furrowed his eyebrows. These types of people were the ones he couldn't stand the most. Fiji, what are you doing? Hurry up and get up. You're throwing away our face. Even if we die, that will be it. What use is there to fear? Seeing that mercenary continue to bow his head down at Jian Chen, one of the other mercenaries couldn't help but curse at him. Fiji, you cowardly bastard, in my entire life I have never seen such a brother like you. The mercenary called Fiji who was kneeling had caused the rest of his mercenaries' friends to look on at him with an extreme amount of disdain. Jian Chen looked at the mercenaries who were shouting at Fiji with some admiration. For those who clung to their lives so cowardly like Fiji, Jian Chen held them in contempt the most. Do you have something to say still? Jian Chen ignored the one who was bowing his head and looked at the other mercenaries. Hearing that, the mercenaries looked at each other with a sorrowful look of regret. They clearly knew that they were under Jian Chen's mercy, but it was most likely that they would stay within the magical beast mountain range forever without being able to see tomorrow's sun. Whether you kill us or cut our flesh, do what you wish, there is nothing more to say. A stubborn mercenary said firmly. Jian Chen had brought them to heel by using his fists and legs alone. This type of strength had caused them all to consider running away, but they clearly knew within their hearts that running away would have practically no chance of success. I'll give you all one chance to live. Hand over all of your Class 2 monster cores, and you may go. Otherwise, you will all die here. Pick now, I will wait for your decision. Jian Chen said gently. Faced with that decision, none of the mercenaries hesitated at all. Immediately nodding their heads, they all obediently took out every single Class 2 monster core from within their space belt and piled them all together neatly. Although they were all very reluctant to part with them, they weren't stupid and knew that this wasn't the time to be stingy. Jian Chen swept his gaze over the pile where there weren't even over 10 Class 2 monster cores. Now hand over the monster cores. Obediently, one of the mercenaries scooped up the monster cores from the ground and placed them all within Jian Chen's hand. Once Jian Chen took the monster cores in his hands, he waved them away. Go on then, I'm feeling generous today. I may be letting you go, but if we meet each other again in the same situation, don't expect it to be the same. The mercenaries didn't bother to stay around and ran with their tails between their legs. Seeing the mercenaries disappear into the forest, Jian Chen smiled as he stored away the Class 2 monster cores within his space belt. Kneading his fists, he muttered to himself, "I don't know how long it has been since I've used my fists to attack people. Although it feels a little weird, it's not all that bad." For these mercenaries, killing Class 2 magical beasts for their monster cores is not an easy task. I've taught them a lesson, but since this is their only source of Class 2 monster cores, this will definitely not be the last time I will see them. Sooner or later, many more people will come by this way. I don't know how many people there will be, but with a prize of 10,000 purple coins, I hope that even stronger people come. Otherwise, my plan will progress too slowly. With this type of good opportunity, I will definitely profit as much as I can. Since all those who are trying to find me are enemies, I won't need stay my hand. The weak are food for the strong, this is the absolute rule of this world. Jian Chen's face slowly revealed a look of expectation. Because of his cultivation, his monster core consumption rate was dozens of times or maybe 100 times more than others. He had no other choice but try to earn more monster cores because of the glows in his dantian. He had been forced to give up using the world essence to cultivate and now only relied on the monster cores instead. Not too long after the mercenaries had left, they immediately spread the news of Jian Chen's whereabouts. Soon enough, Jian Chen's position in the magical beast mountain range was well known by everyone. Quickly, every single mercenary and other parties of power began to rush over to try and overtake him. At this moment, Jian Chen was sitting in the area with no intentions of leaving. Sitting on a tree 30 meters away, he was completely concealed by the tree leaves with barely any parts of his body being visible between the gaps in the leaves. In this situation, it was very difficult to see him. Not too long after, a group of 40 mercenaries slowly walked into the area near where Jian Chen was sitting. All of them were wearing steel helmets with full body armor while being armed to the teeth. Not a single one of them looked to be in disarray, and instead looked to be very well trained. The moment Jian Chen saw these mercenaries through the gaps in the leaves, the name of a single mercenary group flashed through his brain. Immediately, a flash of killing intent could be seen in his eyes as his face grew serious. Crash! A sound came from within the leaves as Jian Chen leaped down from the tree top. What person? Be careful, someone came down from the trees. Just as Jian Chen flew down from the treetops, the armored mercenaries below began to shout as each one of them pulled out a saint weapon at the ready to fight. Jian Chen's feet kicked off the tree, causing him to fly 20 meters forward before finally landing nimbly on the ground right in front of the mercenaries. Who are you? The frontmost armored mercenary stepped toward Jian Chen yelling for him to identify himself. Jian Chen's solemn face looked through the group with a careful eye. It was a shame that he saw no familiar figures within the group. You are the Zhou mercenaries. Jian Chen said, it was no question. That's right, we are the Zhou mercenaries. Who are you, and why do you block our path? The mercenary who was at the front slowly demanded. The Zhou mercenaries weren't weak, and could be considered to be within the top 5 mercenary groups within Wake City. Adding on to their affiliation with the Zhou clan in Wake City, it had given them plenty of arrogance. Once he had confirmed their identities, a large amount of killing intent emerged from Jian Chen in waves of energy. Without any more words, Jian Chen took out his light wind sword and began to charge at the Zhou mercenaries. The last time Jian Chen had met the Zhou mercenaries, they had came across a Class 5 cub in the magical beast mountain range. Although the original members of that Zhou mercenary group weren't here, they had cost the flame mercenaries their lives and caused them to lose the Class 5 cub. Plus, while running away from the Class 5 Golden Fur Tiger King, if it weren't for that member of the Zhou mercenaries who threw the cub at Captain Kendall, the Golden Fur Tiger King wouldn't have chased after the flame mercenaries. So the entire destruction of the flame mercenaries and the death of everyone in it could all be blamed on the Zhou mercenaries. Chapter 150, Extermination. Jian Chen quickly closed the 10 meters between him and the Zhou mercenaries. With his light wind sword, he thrust it toward the frontmost mercenary's throat in hopes to kill him. In a flash, the sword had found itself right in front of his throat. Seeing the sword come at him with incomparably fast speeds, the leader's face underwent a drastic change as he realized that he wasn't able to react in time to block with his own saint weapon. Hastily, he twisted the entire top half of his body to dodge this fatal sword strike, and without hesitation, he retreated backward in order to gain some distance from Jian Chen. Even after Jian Chen's attack had failed to land, his face did not waver at all. Continuing onward, he dashed forward toward the other Zhou mercenaries ahead of him and lashed out with his light wind sword and stabbed 4 great saints through their throats in a flash. Their armor was of no use as Jian Chen had speared through the steel metal as if it were tofu. To make a long story short, in the instant that the 4 mercenaries were killed, the other Zhou mercenaries hadn't even had time to react. From the moment Jian Chen had moved his hand to the moment the 4 mercenaries had been killed, the other mercenaries didn't even have time to breath. "Stay your hand!" The first mercenary that had dodged Jian Chen's blade cried out. After seeing how fast Jian Chen had struck out, he had realized how strong he was. He would not be an easy opponent, so at this current moment, there was no way the Zhou mercenaries would want to fight against this person without reason. However, Jian Chen had turned a deaf ear toward him. The Zhou mercenaries were already on the top of his to-kill list. His light wind sword flashed continuously as it wreaked havoc on his surroundings, his blade almost resembling the death god's scythe that reaped the lives of the Zhou mercenaries without mercy. The great saints of the Zhou mercenaries simply had no chance to defend themselves. They weren't able to catch sight of the blade and thus were stabbed straight through the throat. Even the Saint Masters among the Zhou mercenaries could only defend themselves against a few strikes before Jian Chen claimed their lives with his light wind sword as well. Jian Chen's strength against Saint Masters was far stronger than it was before his breakthrough now. These Saint Master experts would no longer have the ability to harm Jian Chen, and just touching his clothes would already be a difficult task. Jian Chen's figure constantly flickered as he traveled in between mercenaries almost as if he were creating doppelgangers of himself. As he paid attention to his surroundings, each strike toward his body was carefully predicted and dodged. While he was able to injure the enemies around him, his enemies weren't able to do the same to him. Jian Chen's attacks were incomparably sharp beyond anyone's imagination. In the midst of 40 mercenaries, Jian Chen had already stabbed and killed 20 mercenaries within the span of a few seconds, some of which were Saint Masters. Seeing how Jian Chen didn't even expend much energy after killing 20 mercenaries so quickly, the leader of the Zhou mercenaries had felt an icy cold fear within his heart. Hidden behind his stone-cold helmet was his pale face. In his mind he had felt a great deal of puzzlement. He didn't know just when the Zhou mercenaries had offended such a strong person, but without even saying a single word, this person had attacked the Zhou mercenaries ruthlessly. The leader was unable to keep calm and think about what to do, but his brain had quickly come to a conclusion. Immediately turning around, he made a decision to run away. He knew in his heart that he was completely powerless against the great display of strength shown by Jian Chen. Even if he were to stay behind, he wouldn't make much of a difference and would only die there. So if death were to be the case here, he would rather take the chance and run away. Before he could even run 20 meters away, the figure of a person quickly appeared right behind him with an extreme amount of speed. In the blink of an eye the person had already caught up with him as the silver glint of a sword left behind a brilliant glow of light as it arced toward the escaping figure. The leader of the Zhou mercenaries was a peak Saint Master, so the moment he felt an extraordinary amount of sword chi, he immediately ducked onto the ground and rolled away without looking backward. The moment both of his hands hit the ground, he pushed himself back up onto his feet as a long spear simultaneously appeared in his hand. With a large amount of saint force encompassing the spear, he stabbed toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen swayed slightly instead of dodging away and kept charging towards the leader once more. His arm shook as the light wind sword covered the entire area with its bright glow, causing everyone who looked at it to be dazzled at this seemingly unreal experience. Against a sword whose light seemed to encompass the entire sky, the Peak Saint Master expert didn't know what he should do to protect himself. In that moment of hesitation, the silver blade of Jian Chen reappeared from within the glow and stabbed straight through his throat. Bang! Jian Chen kicked at the leader's chest, causing him to fly far backward. Holding onto his bloody light wind sword, Jian Chen ran toward the remaining Zhou mercenaries in an effort to kill them. Jian Chen had no intention of letting a single member leave this place alive. Captain Chen Yunlong has died, Captain Chen Yunlong was killed, Captain Chen Yunlong has already been killed, everybody run. The death of their captain had caused every mercenary to feel an extreme amount of fear within their hearts as everyone began to lose their fighting spirit. Against Jian Chen, who seemed like a god of death, their courage was almost non-existent. Throwing away their helmets, they began trying to escape. After Jian Chen had killed some of the members, the remaining few had all started to run away with all their strength in every possible direction. Although Jian Chen wasn't slow, killing every single mercenary in this case wouldn't be an easy task. Humph, you Zhou mercenaries won't leave this place alive. Jian Chen's eyes had a glow of killing intent behind them as he instantly began to pour out sword qi in tremendous waves from his sword. Immediately, the light wind sword separated from Jian Chen's hand as it flew out with tremendous speed. Transforming into a silver ray of light, it began to fly toward the closest mercenary in an attempt to kill him. At this moment, Jian Chen didn't care about keeping his soul sword a secret, he just wanted the entire Zhou mercenaries to be destroyed. The light wind sword shot through the air like a silver streak of light throughout the area as it stabbed through the throats of all the mercenaries who were trying to escape. In a matter of seconds the remaining 10 mercenaries had all fallen to the ground dead. Chapter 151, This one is honored. The light wind sword nimbly flew through the air as if it had a mind of its own before returning to Jian Chen's hand once more. Jian Chen held out his arm to catch the light wind sword as it flashed toward him in a silver ray of light. It was already dripping with blood, but the tip of its blade could still be seen gleaming. Just as the light wind sword returned to his hand, the blood on the blade of the sword, almost as if it was alive, began to concentrate at the sword's tip. Drop by drop it fell onto the dusty ground below as the previously bloody light wind sword became clear once more. The seemingly mirror-like metal reflected light off of the blade and radiated a hazy white glow of silver light. The forest was basked within its glow and would have dazzled the eyes of anyone that saw it. Sweeping his eyes over the mercenaries, he used his light wind sword to poke at the bodies before taking their space belts away. Carrying the space belts, he walked on over to a clean area to sit down. As he walked over, he continued to pick up the space belts of the dead Zhou mercenaries, and in a short moment, he had accumulated a small pile of space belts. After he had collected every single space belt and piled them together, Jian Chen absorbed the light wind sword back into his body. One by one, Jian Chen began to inspect the items within the space belts for the money and monster cores and letting it stack up into a single pile. In a few moments, the 40 space belts had been inspected and by Jian Chen's side, there was a small pile of monster cores and money. There were a total of 300 monster cores. Most of them were Class 2 monster cores with a Class 3 monster core for every 10 Class 2 monster cores. But there wasn't a single Class 4 monster core to be seen. Half of the stack of coins in the pile were copper and silver coins, with the golden coins taking up a small amount of it to make a total of 500 coins between the three. There were around 50 purple coins, and in total, the cumulative amount of wealth from this pile would be equal to around 70 purple coins. Disliking the poor sum of money, Jian Chen stored both the monster cores and money into his own space belt. Leaving behind the dead bodies of the Zhou mercenaries along with their space belts, Jian Chen left the area. Everything that remained in their space belts was just useless junk, as every single valuable had been taken by Jian Chen. Jian Chen didn't go too far, and instead hid himself on top of a large tree. He knew that there were mercenaries trying to find him so that they could take him back to the Tianxiong clan for the reward. However, because the magical beast mountain range was so large and the terrain within so complicated, even if they were to have men every 100 meters, it would still be hard to find him. The amount of time it would take to find another group of mercenaries would be too pitiful if he were to wait elsewhere. On the mountain range, every single mercenary was still trying to get to this area. The Zhou mercenaries were the first group that had reached this place. Not too long after, from his hiding spot, Jian Chen spotted yet another group of mercenaries coming in his direction. This group only had 10 people, a vastly different amount than the previous Zhou mercenaries' numbers. However, Jian Chen could sense that this group was filled with Saint Masters. Their group strength wasn't weaker than the Zhou mercenaries at all. Just as the group of mercenaries walked under the tree Jian Chen was hiding in, he suddenly jumped down from his perch. Landing gently on the ground, he suddenly sped toward the group with the light wind sword in his hand as he stabbed forward with a tremendous amount of sword chi flowing from his blade. The 10 mercenaries had immediately reacted when Jian Chen had started his movement, but Jian Chen's speed was much faster than their reaction speed and he had already closed the gap between them. With his light wind sword, he thrust it out in a great streak of light as it stabbed into the right shoulder of one of the mercenaries. At the same time, every single one of the mercenaries had already pulled out their saint weapons as they snarled in anger. The mercenaries in the back began to run forward in hopes of trapping Jian Chen within a circle. Jian Chen pulled out his sword from the man's right shoulder and immediately put himself into a defensive position as the Saint Masters all slashed down at him. Like a silver viper, the light wind sword flashed forward toward another mercenary. The targeted mercenary hastily brought up his sword to block the strike, but with the light wind sword being so fast, his defenses were quickly overwhelmed, and he was ultimately stabbed through the right shoulder. "You're seeking death." Seeing one of their own take damage, every other mercenary became furious as even more saint force entered their saint weapons. Without mercy they continued their pursuit toward Jian Chen with their saint weapon. Jian Chen flew back 10 meters in a nimble manner, causing the sword strikes to hit nothing but air. The other remaining saint weapons crashed into the floor, causing a large crater to form. Jian Chen's right hand held his sword as the tip of it pointed downward toward the ground while his eyes stared at the mercenaries. "To dare attack us so underhandedly, you must be tired of living, you bastard." A big sturdy person cursed as he lifted his gigantic two-handed sword up to swing down at Jian Chen. "Bantu." Before that man could take a step forward, another middle-aged man came up to block him. The one named Bantu stared angrily at the one blocking him, Mu Jian. "Don't you block me, did you not see that bastard injure Hado and Eric?" The one named Mu Jian shook his head as he ignored Bantu to look at Jian Chen. "Fellow friend, I don't know what reason you might have suddenly attack us. You are here to find and capture the one called Jian Chen." Jian Chen said. Hearing this, the one named Mu Jian looked at the light wind sword in Jian Chen's hands. As if he realized something, his face underwent a huge change as he cried out, "Could you be Jian Chen then?" "That's right, I am Jian Chen." Jian Chen smiled, but it was an otherworldly type of smile. Hearing that, the 10 mercenaries looked at each other with an excited look on their faces. They didn't think that they would be able to find Jian Chen, but to find him here, if they were able to capture him, then the 10,000 purple coins reward would be theirs. However, instead of a happy look on Mu Jian's face, there was only an expression of concentration. "So you're Jian Chen, this is too, stop talking." Just as one mercenary was about to burst out into a smile and say something, Mu Jian had immediately cut him off. Glaring at him, Mu Jian turned back to Jian Chen and cupped his hands together. "I did not think honored one here would be the honored Jian Chen known for his military prowess. This one here is named Mu Jian. To be able to see the elegant and honored Jian Chen, this is truly a blessing enough for 3 lifetimes." Chapter 152, Indecision. Jian Chen laughed and spoke, "You praise me too much, honored Mu Jian truly praises me too much. I suppose your group of men entered the magical beast mountain range to find me as well." "That's correct, we came to capture you." The one Mu Jian was holding back had spoken out loud. Hearing the man speak, Mu Jian's face changed before staring angrily at the man behind him. On the man's face was a look of confusion and did not understand what was happening. Mu Jian cupped his hands together as he faced Jian Chen once more and laughed. "Honored Jian Chen, this one and my friends did indeed enter the magical beast mountain range, but it was to watch the excitement. We never had the idea of trying to capture the honored Jian Chen. I hope that you won't misunderstand us." "Misunderstand?" Jian Chen couldn't help but laugh. "If I didn't hear incorrectly, then I just heard your friend over there say your group wanted to capture me. For this reason, how could I not misunderstand you?" Hearing this, Mu Jian had an embarrassed look on his face. When they entered the magical beast mountain range, they really did want to capture Jian Chen. Although they had heard about Jian Chen's strength and how so many saint masters had died by Jian Chen's hands, they had thought it was a rumor. Every man had always mistrusted rumors, and Mu Jian and his group was no different. But the moment Mu Jian had personally seen Jian Chen's strength, he could see that none of his companions could be an opponent for Jian Chen. Even if they had the superiority in numbers, that didn't mean a guaranteed capture of Jian Chen without them taking on heavy losses as well. He was also truly aware that if Jian Chen had been serious in taking the lives of his companions, they would have long since been lying down on the ground. Because of that, Mu Jian had already given up on thinking about trying to capture Jian Chen. At this very moment, he didn't want to enter a conflict with Jian Chen, otherwise, they would take on heavy losses. Seeing the silent Mu Jian, Jian Chen spoke up once more, "I don't wish to kill the innocent randomly. If you hand over all of the monster cores within your space belts, then you can purchase your life back. If you don't, however, then don't blame me for being merciless." Suddenly, a glint of murderous intent made it to Jian Chen's eyes. Hearing this, every single one of the mercenaries revealed an angry yet disdainful expression. Among the 10, no one except for Mu Jian had that clear expression of understanding. "Jian Chen, you're a despicable person that only knows how to use dirty tricks. What qualifications do you have to say something like that? Come and eat Uncle's sword." Jian Chen's words had angered many of the people there, and immediately, the sturdy man behind Mu Jian had brought out his giant sword in anger as he charged at Jian Chen. "Hold up." Mu Jian tried to block the man without caring for the anger in his eyes. Turning around to look at Jian Chen, he spoke, "Jian Chen, we became enemies by accident. Could it be you're still going to force us in this way?" Jian Chen began to laugh coldly. "I already told you. Leave behind your monster cores, and you may go. Otherwise, I won't stay my hand." He paused for a moment before he said, "However, if you make a move against me and suffer casualties, don't blame me." Jian Chen's words had left no room for argument, causing Mu Jian to feel extremely gloomy as he said, "It's just as they said, everything must be given up without a word. Honored Jian Chen, you're being too excessive." One space belt was filled with the monster cores that they had risked their own lives to attain from killing magical beasts and accumulated after a long period of time. Mu Jian knew that if he were to fight with Jian Chen, then there would definitely be a loss, but at the same time, giving all of his hard-earned monster cores to Jian Chen was an impossible thing. "Mu Jian, what are you doing spouting bullshit with him? Hurry up and capture him. He wants to take all of our monster cores by himself. What a huge joke that is." A golden-haired man spoke with a huge amount of disdain. "Jian Chen, although you've injured 2 of our brothers, that was only because you had attacked us from behind. There's 10 of us, so that doesn't mean someone like you could be an opponent of ours. At the very most, the end result would be both sides taking on heavy injuries, but that won't be much damage to our side. On the other hand, if you take on heavy injuries, that would make things very disadvantageous for you. After all, there's many people crawling about in the magical beast mountain range who are here to capture you. To us, this isn't anything to worry about, but to you, this is a struggle between life and death, so asking for us to hand over our monster cores to you is an impossible task. The one who spoke was a sturdy person. Clearly, he knew that Jian Chen's strength wasn't all that weak either. Jian Chen's eye flashed with a cold glare as he raised his light-wind sword. "So it's like that, all that's left to do is fight then," he said as he charged toward the 10 people. Mu Jian didn't say anything more and held his sword. Charging with the other mercenaries, everyone prepared to fight Jian Chen. All 10 of these people had the strength of a Saint Master, and in the past, if Jian Chen were to fight against these 10 Saint Masters, he would be at a huge disadvantage. But right now, his strength was well over the level of the surrounding Saint Masters and he could handle them with ease. Using the profound steps to defend himself against the attacks from the Saint Masters and retaliating, both the mercenaries and Jian Chen were evenly matched. Despite the disadvantage Jian Chen had for being alone, not too long later, the mercenaries were slowly losing their advantage. A good amount of times the mercenaries had almost been pierced straight through their necks by Jian Chen, but they would also dodge to the side at the most crucial moment. However, they had already been stabbed multiple times by Jian Chen's sword. Jian Chen was like a demon possessed as he flashed throughout the crowd. Each time he disappeared and reappeared, he would attack from almost every direction with the light wind sword that emitted a strong amount of sword qi. The light wind sword danced as it flew through the air. The sounds of it traveling through the air could be heard clearly as it concentrated its attack in one straight line. PCH. The light wind sword's tip sharpened by the sword qi stabbed into the joint of a mercenary's right arm. At the same time, the light wind sword bore straight through his body, causing the arm to lose all functionality. That man began to shriek out in agony as the sword in his hand disappeared into thin air. His right arm had been completely skewered, causing him to lose any fighting strength he had since he could no longer hold a weapon. Bang! Jian Chen's kicked the man firmly in the abdomen, causing him to fly backward. Swaying his body to the side, he dodged another strike that came at him. At the same time, he lashed out with his sword at the man, causing him to panic. Immediately taking advantage of the hasty parry, Jian Chen immediately stabbed him through the right shoulder. Chapter 153, Meeting another great Saint Master. The injury to the right shoulder had impacted the man's ability to swing his sword. The man who was struck through the shoulder had felt an injury so grave that it was beyond anything he had ever felt. Because of the sword qi enhanced sword tip, when the light wind sword stabbed through his right shoulder, his entire right arm had lost functionality as well as fighting ability. The injured members could only helplessly retreat while Jian Chen advanced forward to fight the other mercenaries. The sounds of Saint weapon clashing against Saint weapon could be heard constantly as the Saint force from everyone mixed in with everyone else's. The Saint force had even reached a point where the nearby grass was flattened while the dirt from the ground flew up in one giant dust cloud, covering everyone's figure. Every so often the miserable sounds of pain could be heard as yet another person was kicked into the air. Each figure was soaked with blood and had injuries all over their bodies. Not too long later, the previously 10 mercenaries had been reduced down to a small handful. Jian Chen's figure had been constantly slashing at his opponents in a fierce manner, but there was not even a single wound to be seen anywhere on his body. Blocking the downward slash of a sword, Jian Chen's light wind sword streaked forward and stabbed into the right shoulder of another mercenary. "I don't wish to slaughter the innocent, so I'll give you one last chance to go. If you remain stubborn like this, then don't blame me anymore." Jian Chen called out without any emotion, but it could be seen that there was a killing intent within his eyes. He had been very lenient until now, but because they were so stubborn, he had no choice but to kill them. This was a very common thing on the Tianyuan continent, so Jian Chen didn't think he was at fault. After all, this world obeyed the primal laws of the jungle, and so the strong held all of the power. The weak would never have any say in this world. If any mercenary were to come into the magical beast mountain range, they were there just to capture Jian Chen and bring him back to the Tianqiong clan for the bounty, and these 10 mercenaries in front of him were no different. If it weren't for the fact that Jian Chen was stronger than them, these mercenaries wouldn't have been so unwilling to fight him at first. Hearing this, the one called Mu Jian revealed the struggle he was having within his mind as he looked at his heavily injured and weakened mercenaries. Biting his lip, he finally yelled out, "Stop!" Mu Jian didn't have a weak amount of prestige among this group of mercenaries. The moment he had spoken, every single mercenary had immediately jumped backward and looked with fear at Jian Chen and his slender light wind sword. His sword was so fast that it had caused even them to be extremely afraid. During their battle with Jian Chen, there were many times that the light wind sword had almost struck them, only to be saved by their nearby comrades at the very last moment. Mu Jian continued to look at Jian Chen with a complicated look, but seeing the amount of blood that was leaking down from his light wind sword, he suddenly became dejected and said helplessly, "Everyone take out your monster cores. Honored Jian Chen has already been merciful toward us. If we don't follow his demands this time, then simple injuries won't be the end of our problems." This time, none of the mercenaries had any thoughts of disagreeing. With a dejected look on their faces, they silently began to pull out all of their remaining monster cores from their space belts and piled them up on the ground. After that short exchange, they all knew that even with 10 people, they were not enough to be classified as an opponent for this youth. With his extremely fast sword strokes and ability to defend so quickly, they simply had no way of attacking or resisting. These 10 Saint Masters had many monster cores on them. Although they didn't have many Class 3 monster cores, they still had plenty of Class 2 monster cores. "Jian Chen, this is all of the monster cores we have, that means we can go now, correct?" Mu Jian spoke with an ugly expression. Jian Chen looked at the pile of monster cores on the ground with an involuntary smile on his face. If you had just given the monster cores earlier, then all of this could have been avoided. "That's fine, although I, Jian Chen, cannot call myself a gentleman, I am a man who keeps his promises. You can go." Mu Jian spared one last look at the small pile of monster cores on the ground, a look of reluctance. With a helpless sigh, Mu Jian and his friends could only leave this place behind. Although the pile of monster cores wasn't a lot relatively speaking, it was all the Saint Masters had. "Remember, I don't wish to see you come and face me again, otherwise, I will definitely not be as merciful. You would best do to leave the magical beast mountain range immediately." As the 10 mercenaries walked away, Jian Chen had called out to them before they could get too far. Hearing this, Mu Jian had stopped for only a second, but he didn't say anything. Quickly after, he disappeared into the forest. Jian Chen recollected his light wind sword and calmly walked toward the pile of monster cores. Bending down to store all of it into his personal space belt, he had counted that there were around 200 monster cores. A good amount of the cores were Class 2, but there were around 20 Class 3 monster cores. Just as Jian Chen had finished cleaning up all of the monster cores, he slowly straightened his back and gave a cold smile. "Fellow friend, you've been here for some time and seen quite enough. Isn't it time for you to come out? Ha ha ha." Just as Jian Chen finished talking, a loud voice came out from the forest. Afterward, a gray shadow flew out from within and landed 20 meters away from where Jian Chen stood. The person who came was rather old, his age was around 50 to 60 years old. His face was rather red as he looked at Jian Chen with a lively expression. Judging by how disorderly his silver hair was, the man was rather unconventional with his looks. He wore a gray robe and was taller than Jian Chen by a large amount, and even though he was standing on the ground with no unusual posture, Jian Chen could feel an indomitable pressure enshrouding him. Seeing this elder, Jian Chen couldn't help but heighten his guard as his face grew more serious. Staring deeply at the elder, he spoke 3 words, "Great Saint Master." The elder laughed, "Little baby, I didn't think you'd be able to tell this old man's strength. Not bad, not bad. Truly not bad. It would appear you have some strength. It is no wonder that old bastard Tianxiong Lai wasn't able to capture you. Chapter 154, Killing a Great Saint Master, Part 1. Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath. Although he had long since guessed that the chances of a great saint master coming after him for the 10,000 purple coins were quite large, he didn't think it'd be so soon. There was no fear within Jian Chen's heart. Although he couldn't say for sure that he could win against a great saint master expert, he had confidence that he could at least fight against one to some degree. At the same time, Jian Chen was also secretly rejoicing. He was rejoicing his foresight that had told him to first cultivate until he was a saint master. If he hadn't, then if he were to come across a great saint master, he would have no choice but to try and escape. Against this elderly great saint master, Jian Chen had felt a huge amount of pressure. Quickly, he had calmed himself down and stared at the elder with a barely calm expression. "Dear elder, could it be that you were also enticed by the 10,000 purple coins for my capture?" The baby asks a question he already knows the answer to. This old one won't spare any talk with you. Come along with me quietly, or I'll do it myself. You must have realized by now that I am not like the previous 10 saint masters you just fought. The elder casually looked at Jian Chen, but he did not see Jian Chen as an opponent. Jian Chen let out a sneer as the light-wind sword reappeared within his right hand. As he grasped the hilt of the sword, the tip dragged against the ground as he spoke. Waiting to be captured and delivered was never my style. Dear elder, this one thanks you for your smart idea. Suddenly, Jian Chen disappeared into a blur with only the smallest of traces of his figure as he flew toward the elder. In a split second, the 20-meter gap between the two was quickly closed as the light-wind sword began to emit a strong amount of sword qi and stabbed at the elder's throat. The careless expression on the elder's face was gone in an instant and was replaced by a serious one. His palm began to envelop with a strong amount of saint force before condensing into a foot-long dagger. In the elder's hands, it shone coldly as it greeted the light-wind sword's approach. The light-wind sword and the elder's dagger collided against each other with a large sound. Immediately a large wave of saint force emerged in waves from the impact and spread out in a circle around them in a manner that was noticeable to the naked eye. As it rippled away from the two fighters, the surrounding grass was immediately flattened as the wave of saint force rippled over it. It had even kicked up a dust cloud from the ground and immediately caused visibility to be lowered. A slight hum could be heard from Jian Chen's throat as he was forced to fly back a few meters. For every step, a deep imprint could be seen in the dirt. The strength of a great saint master is indeed very strong. I didn't think that even after making a breakthrough to the saint master level, there would still be such a wide gap between the two. Jian Chen muttered. With this current exchange with the elder, it was Jian Chen who had been at a disadvantage. After all, in a battle of strength with saint force, how could Jian Chen who was only at the saint master stage contend against the elder who was at the great saint master? Yet, Jian Chen was also secretly delighted. After making contact with the elder, he had realized just how wide that gap in strength was, and how close he was to the elder's level, making him quite happy. On the other side, the elder's face grew even more serious as he looked at Jian Chen and spoke solemnly. The baby here seems to be quite complicated. It seems that if this old one wants to capture you, then this old one better put in more effort. Jian Chen's face carried a cold smile. Even if you do everything you can, you won't be able to capture me. The elder laughed with a chilling smile. The baby knows how to talk big, then allow this old one to observe and see just how strong you are. After he had finished speaking, the elder's dagger exploded with saint force. Following that explosion of energy, the elder suddenly disappeared and then abruptly reappeared right in front of Jian Chen with his dagger ready to pierce through Jian Chen's heart. Because the elder was a great saint master, Jian Chen didn't dare lower his concentration. The saint force within his body began to circulate and gather around the light wind sword within his right hand. Forming a white haze of sword qi over the blade, Jian Chen swung his sword at the incoming dagger. Suddenly, another explosion of energy could be seen as the shockwave was sent throughout the area. The dirt on the ground was sent flying into the air as the clash of saint force immediately pressed against the ground. Countless plants were uprooted and sent into the air. In one strike, Jian Chen was once again sent flying back a few steps while the elder was once again unaffected and instead chased after the retreating Jian Chen with his dagger aimed at Jian Chen's heart. Jian Chen's body shifted to the side, causing the dagger to harmlessly slice past his clothes. After, the light wind sword qi enshrouded the elder within, and in a split second, he had lashed out 10 times with each sword stroke aimed at various parts of the elder's body. The elder brought back his dagger and brandished it in front of him, defending himself against the various strikes. Ding 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 ding, the sounds of the weapons clashing together could be heard as the light wind sword and dagger continuously hit each other in a split second. Suddenly, the elder retreated fiercely as the robe he was wearing was no longer in a completely intact state. On his chests there were a few scars that were leaking blood. From the other parts of his robes, a few strands and patches were already falling down to the ground. Even on top of his head, a few strands of his hair could be seen drifting in the wind after being cut. Right in front of him, Jian Chen did not look to be in a better state. Although there wasn't any injuries on his body, his face was a morbidly pale shade. Seeing how his clothes had been ripped apart in such a manner, the elder looked at Jian Chen with a calculating look. "You really can't see a favor when it comes, don't blame me when I don't show mercy then." Jian Chen only laughed. "Many saint masters have died by my sword, but never could I claim to have killed a great saint master with my light wind sword. Today, you shall be the first." How arrogant! The elder snarled as he sped toward Jian Chen without any further words to be said. Chapter 155, Killing a Great Saint Master, 2. Without any fear, Jian Chen charged forward with his light wind sword and once more clashed fiercely with the elder. This time, Jian Chen had used his entire strength and profound steps to clash against the elder. Using his light wind sword to stab at the elder continuously, he simultaneously dodged each and every strike from his opponent. From the beginning of this new round, he had avoided clashing his weapon with the elder's, and it was only when it was impossible to dodge that he used his sword to defend. The elder's control over his dagger was superb, and it was almost as if he had reached the absolute pinnacle with his weapon. Almost as if each strike was an act of perfection, the dagger always flew straight toward Jian Chen's heart. The two fighters traveled back and forth throughout the area. Their movements had kicked up a strong breeze. Already, the breeze was starting to become a strong gale that threatened to uproot the surrounding grass and send it flying into the air. The two continued to go at each other, but under the fine control of Jian Chen, his own saint weapon had rarely crashed against the elder's dagger. With each passing moment, the elder was getting more and more depressed. He was feeling a deep pit of anger within himself. His strength was clearly higher than that of his opponent, but because his opponent had the slight advantage in speed and also boasted a superior reaction time, there were plenty of times when the elder was unable to find a solution to do anything. There were also many times where even with his Saint Master strength, the terrifyingly fast speed of the sword had left the elder at a critical junction between life and death. "Little baby, you call yourself a male yet you fight an elderly person without hesitation to such a degree. Just what point is there to that?" The elder barked out with anger as he couldn't handle this battle any longer. Hearing this, Jian Chen had a small smile on his face. To try to get an easy and short merit, this was an unwise choice. "Do you think I am that foolish?" The elder was temporarily stunned without saying a word. A flash of killing intent quickly passed through his eyes as he quickly leaped toward Jian Chen once more with his dagger ready to kill him. Knowing that the elder no longer had any idea of letting him live, Jian Chen's eyes flashed with a tint of coldness before increasing his speed by a notch. The amount of sword qi in the air intensified and looked as if the entire area was covered within its shroud, which made it almost impossible for the two to find each other. With the increased amount of strength on Jian Chen's part, the amount of pressure on the elder was increased many times over. Despite being a great saint master with a good amount of speed, he was unable to match Jian Chen in almost any aspect and was constantly put in a state of panic. Whoosh! At the same time, a sword qi sharpened blade came out of the mist abruptly. The elder simply had no time to react, and so the sharp sword immediately cut through his right arm at the wrist. The pain from losing his right hand caused the elder to be stunned. Yet while he was stunned, the light-wind sword had quickly flashed toward the elder's figure. The elder quickly held his dagger in his other hand in front of him to act as a form of defense as he tried to retreat backward. Suddenly, before he could get far, the elder came to a screeching halt as a bloody sword stabbed straight through his throat and protruded underneath his chin. He didn't know how or when Jian Chen had gotten behind him, only that his light-wind sword had already stabbed straight through his throat, landing a killing blow. The elder's dazed eyes viewed the sword in his throat with a look of pure disbelief. He was utterly confused on how Jian Chen could sneak behind him without him noticing. Yet, the questions the elder had would never be answered as his body slowly locked up and fell to the ground. Both of his eyes grew wide and clouded over as a sign of death. Jian Chen pulled out his sword with a breath of air escaping from his lips. Fighting this great saint master had cost him a large amount of his energy, and after this fight, he was starting to breathe heavily. Absorbing his light-wind sword into his body once more, he looked at the elderly figure on the floor. With a small sigh, he muttered, "To have dozens of years of cultivation destroyed in a single day, AI, there was no need for that. If only you didn't have greed seduce your heart into attacking me, you wouldn't have ended up like that." With that said, Jian Chen bent over to pick up the space belt on the elder and began to take out every item from within. The amount of monster cores within the elder's space belt didn't number more than the amount Jian Chen had, only having around 50 monster cores in total. However, the lowest-ranked monster core was a Class 2 monster core. There was not a single Class 1 monster core in sight. Over half were Class 2 monster cores and 20 Class 3 monster cores. There was also a single Class 4 monster core. Aside from the monster cores, Jian Chen also counted around 70 purple coins worth of money. After storing the monster cores and purple coins within his space belt, Jian Chen turned over the space belt within his hand once more before realizing there was a piece of white fur within it. This piece of white fur was about the size of his palm. It was soft to touch and seemed extremely cozy to hold. There was also a warm sensation to it. This piece of fur, Jian Chen stared at the fur in his hand with some shock. Immediately throwing the space belt to the ground, he dove into his own space ring from within his space belt and took out a red embroidered pouch. This red pouch was the memento and family heirloom of the Bai clan that was handed down to him from his mother by Yun Tian. Jian Chen's fingers nimbly opened up the pouch to take out the piece of white fur from within. His hands began to shake as he unfolded the piece of fur, only to see that the one from within the red pouch was also the size of his palm. As Jian Chen compared the two pieces of fur closely, his eyes widened more and more in shock. That was because these two pieces of fur were almost identical, even the texture of the fur was the same. From the looks of things, it was almost as if the two pieces of fur came from one single piece that was cut into multiple parts. Jian Chen's eyes looked back to the elder's resting body once more as his heart began to beat. The piece of fur from within the red pouch was the family heirloom of the Bai clan. To this day, the heirloom must have been well over 100 years old, and although he didn't know what use this piece of fur was for, the antiquity and price for it was clearly self-evident. To be treasured by the Bai clan whose accumulated strength had been wiped out in a single night, it was simple to see that this piece of fur would surely have a high price. At this moment, To unexpectedly find an identical piece of fur from this great saint master of an elder, Jian Chen couldn't help but wonder who this elder was. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.